Welcome to the February 27th meeting of the Ames Community School District Board of Directors. I call the meeting to order and take approval of the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Moved by Briggs, second by Rosser. Discussion? Proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. Director Briggs, would you please read the mission statement?
The mission of the Ames Community Schools is to ensure that all learners develop the knowledge, skills, attitudes, values, and personal esteem necessary to grow in and shape a changing society.
Thank you. First topic tonight's a public hearing on the Sawyer fascia project. I'll open the public hearing, and there no one wished to speak. Any other comments made to the board through the office?
No, sir.
Okay.
School soffit fascia project to modern builders in the amount of $124,800.
Second.
Moved by Esposito, second by Briggs. Discussion. Proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. Next public hearing
Hey,
for the...
Luke, do we need to roll call those or no?
Not for that one.
Got it.
Not
Thank
for that
you.
one. Next public hearing for the Ames Middle School Auditorium Lighting Project. I'll open the public hearing, and no one wishes to speak. Any other comments to the office?
No.
None? All right, I'll close the public hearing and take a motion.
I move the board award the contract for the middle school auditorium lighting improvements project to Randall Electric Incorporated in the amount of $199,324 for base bid and alternate number 1.
Second.
Moved by Rosser, second by Franson. Discussion. Proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. Moving into our next discussion item tonight, it's going to be the Sawyer Cultural Proficiency.
As we move toward the presentation and discussion item from Sue and the Sawyer staff, I want to have Patrick or Carl come forward and play a short video from Dr. Mandy Ross. Mandy had planned on being here tonight to deliver this message in person, but she's been excused for one of those life moments that mothers cherish. She just became a grandmother for the firstborn son of her youngest son and bride. So congratulations to Mandy. This morning, actually, before she left, she created this video that we could play.
Good evening. I'm Mandy Ross. It has come to my attention that some of my remarks at the January 30th board meeting have caused concerns for some members of our school community. I truly regret that my remarks were taken in a way that did not reflect my intent nor my character. Throughout my career, I've tried to work for the benefit of each and every student we serve in our schools. However, our data suggests that we have not been able to consistently close those gaps by ourselves. This year, some of our principals, along with their staffs, have begun working with Dr. Daniel Spikes, a professor in the Iowa State School of Education, whose research has focused on cultural proficiency and anti-racism. In the past month, the district has begun planning with Dr. Spikes to develop a 3-year plan to help all staff, including central office administration, principals, teachers, EAs, all staff, as well as inviting the board to explore our policies, our practices, and our own biases as we work to meet the needs of all students. Over the weekend, the board and administration received an email from members of Inclusive Ames, which we received as a very positive sign that our community is ready and willing to join us in this work. We would like to invite members of Inclusive Ames to join us in an action committee that would include principals and representatives from other stakeholder groups to help us develop strategies to close the racial and ethnic disparities that exist in the Ames schools. We know the disparities exist, and we want to get it corrected as much as anyone. It is our moral obligation to do so. Our administrative team has recognized and made efforts to address the disparities in our data, but we are also open to new and additional solutions and strategies. We believe it is a larger issue than the schools alone, and we welcome community support and action. I will be in contact with representatives from Inclusive Ames to set up a planning meeting with me, with Dr. Taylor, and including Jonas Michael, relative to the recommendations that have been made by the group. We are stronger together. Thank you.
I want to say thanks actually to Gail and Annika. I know that they're both here for the email that we received this weekend, and we actually found it very reassuring. We recognize there's an achievement gap between some of our minority groups and their peers, and it's not a surprise to us. We've actually recognized the issue and have been struggling with it for several years. We've had small successes, we've had individual successes, but we haven't been consistent. Some may even claim it's been consistent failure, which is where I'm going to commend our administrators and our teaching staff, all of our teaching staff, for their efforts and what they do and for what they can do for kids and families each and every day. And it's not easy to accept failure, but our principals and teachers have continued to work very hard at it. Responsive classroom, poverty simulations, changing schedules to include additional instructional time, tutorials, plus periods. There's lots of things that we've been messing with and trying. The good thing about it is our staff, our administrators and teachers have never quit, and we're now diving into cultural proficiency and seeking new evidence-based strategies to support cultural proficiency as part of a multi-year plan. That's why I was excited about the email that we received and why we wanted Inclusive Ames to join us in an action committee to dig deep and find solutions to meet the needs of our kids and families. And I'm pleased to announce that at 5:05 this afternoon, I did receive an email that Gail and Annika had sent on behalf of Inclusive Ames, and they have accepted the invitation to meet with Mandy, Jonas, and I ASAP to begin the planning and to get moving. And we're sincere in our offer, and we thank you so much for accepting. But based on the premise that no one knows what they don't know, I think this is going to be a marvelous opportunity for you to get to know us as educators and people, not just central office administration, but to really get to know the building principals and the teaching staff that are on the front line every day. You need to know that we've been doing, or what we've been doing and planning, and what we plan on doing, and the hurdles that we face every single day. Conversely, we need to get to know you as parents, community members, and people, and we need to know how you can help us and educate us to get over those hurdles. So we're really looking forward to your involvement. One of the things that I've always believed in my entire life is no one ever goes their way alone. There are people that always push us. There are people that are always there to lend a helping hand, so we want your help. Together, I do believe that maybe we can close the gap, and I'd like to propose that we update your current data, put an asterisk by it, and begin to work together and see if we can make a difference next year and every year thereafter. And I know Elisa had a comment or two she wanted to make.
You stole most of my thunder.
I stole your
So-
thunder.
No, I had the opportunity to meet with Inclusive Ames last week, and I know they're here somewhere, but I don't see them. And I want to thank you for getting a hold of me so we could have that conversation. I think sometimes this board table becomes a wall, so I appreciate the opportunity to be able to sit and discuss those things, because we are a community, and we got to get after this together. And I so appreciate, I know we have many of our building leadership members here, and I know that you all care about this very much too. I don't know why you're here, but if it's because of this, thank you for being here. Because I have, since I had the opportunity to meet with Gail and Annika last week, I've really been intentional about having some conversations with staff and individuals, and they really, within the district, and they really care about this. And I think we've got 4 of them here tonight who want to share something they've been working on. That isn't the answer, but it is certainly something that you're getting us to step forward and do things. So I appreciate that. And please know that as a board, we continue to question and seek to learn more information. But part of that is hearing from you and your experiences, because that better informs us. Yes, I'm a mom. But I'm going to have my own experiences, and I know that we have parents in the room that have had their own experiences. So please share those with us, because that's how we're going to make this a better community and a better school district. So thank you.
And Annika and Gail, I shared your email with the board, very generous email, so thank you again very much for stepping forward. Sue and staff.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Starting off to say, as Sawyer Elementary that's represented, and I'll give everybody the opportunity to introduce themselves in just a moment. But the work that we are doing is work that is happening in all of our buildings, and we're just going to highlight some of the work that we have done working on that culture of proficiency and knowing that we're novices at this, we're just learning. Our motto has always been to learn and grow together, and that's for our students, but it's also for our staff. And we have a lot of learning to do together, and when we do that across our building and across our district and into our community, how powerful of an impact we can have with our students. So to start off, I'm Sue Lawler, building principal. To my right is Nicole Coronado. She's one of our fourth grade teachers. Riley Drake, school counselor. And then Autumn Sealer at the far end of the table, our instructional coach. And we do thank and are excited to have all the people that are here tonight to both support and join us in this dialogue that we are beginning with. We started at the beginning of the year with school improvement plans and looking at what we needed to do to continue to impact our students. And so we were looking at both our reading and math scores, and we knew that we were focusing on instruction, explicit instruction, best practices, research-based, and realized that we were closing the gap over the past few years. However, we realized when we were looking at our numbers that we still had a core issue. We weren't impacting all. And so we decided as an instructional leadership team that we needed to dig in deeper into our data. And so we looked at our disaggregated data, we looked at the data that we had from behaviors to Iowa assessment to our FAST scores, all data that we could get our hands on. And we decided that we needed to do more so that we weren't just impacting most students, we were talking about the strengths of all of our students, and so that became the goal for us this year. We know that we already have many pieces and structures, some structures that are in place in our classrooms. We utilize responsive classroom in our classrooms. Morning meetings are all part, and I know it's utilized at the middle school too, under developmental design, if I remember correctly. All of those pieces are working on developing our community because we know how much of an impact that community has. Being able to have the students share about their community that they live in, the home, all of those different pieces, and then to bring that back to our classrooms and work on cultivating that community within our rooms and across our building. We're going to get into a little bit more, but we have a lot of those structures in place, and those were some of the designs that we already were working on. We also made a decision as an instructional leadership team, and some of these components, each one of our staff members will go in a little bit more detail. We decided and determined that we needed a family advisory committee. We have an amazing parent-teacher organization that helps support us, but we knew we needed more. We wanted to hear from our parents about how we can make a difference in the classroom. What were we missing out? What components were we necessarily not hitting on and impacting with our students? And so we dug into that and had our first family advisory committee meeting about 4 weeks ago, and we are doing that every 6 weeks, and like I said, we'll go into a little bit more detail on that. We've also worked on some professional development, started off the year looking at doing some reading of some articles. We also were going to be having April. Go ahead, Riley.
Alicia Oglesby of Washington, D.C. is coming to our building to work with our staff in a professional development setting, but she's also going to be working in PLCs with teachers, with teams, to help them to build up their practices.
So that's already planned and part of our structure. And we've also been looking at the restorative justice, trying to figure out what else, how else we can, when we're struggling with kids with behavior, what else can we do? With some of the tried and true techniques are not always reaching our students. There's other options out there, and so we're digging in a little bit deeper with this practices, along with the bullying prevention that has already been embedded with, within our building too.
So we thought we'd kind of just think back to where we started and where we're going. Sue just really touched on everything that we've been working on, but this really started about mid-year last year, we kind of came together as a staff and talked about what we believe about kids, what we believe about instruction, which kind of sounds like a silly question because we're all teaching and we definitely believe in it, but sometimes that's a hard question to answer. Why are you here? Why do you show up every day? What do you believe is tried and true about our students? And we've had some really good dialogue as we wrestled with what kind of school we wanted for our kids, all of our kids, and how do we get there? And so that's kind of where we started with last year. And we've been kind of developing some of our own beliefs as a staff that we can own and dig our teeth into and stand behind, and also with that a mission and a vision for how we're going to get there and what it looks like to take those steps. And it's been a long process when we have 28 different staff members all coming in different angles with how we can best serve these kids. We've really wrestled with what are we going to stand true to? What are we going to make sure that we prove to kids every single day, not only with our words, but with our actions? And so we kind of realized that we needed to start with ourselves, and we needed to work from the inside out, as Riley would say, and really figure out how we wanted to better meet the needs of our students.
So cultural proficiency, as you can see defined, has been defined for us by Dr. Daniel Spikes at Iowa State University. And he could speak to this much more eloquently than I could. But what he advocates and what many researchers and scholars advocate for is what's called an inside-out approach. And that's really been the approach that we're taking at Sawyer. Inside-out simply means that we begin by reflecting on ourselves, our own individual understandings, our values, our beliefs, these systems that form our values and our beliefs. And our approach is one that prizes individuals but focuses mainly on the school culture, which has a life force outside of all of the individuals who comprise within it. This focus removes the need to place blame on individuals, which is sometimes the pushback. When you think about cultural proficiency, there's this defense mechanism that kind of arises within people, and they think, well, what am I doing wrong? I don't have, this isn't going on, and this isn't going on, and I'm certainly meeting the needs of all students. But within this approach, we're really taking the chance to learn about ourselves, and then we're taking the chance to understand what our own biases, what our own assumptions might be that are impacting the students who are in our classrooms every day. It involves all members to determine how to align policies, practices, and procedures to achieve cultural proficiency.
And how we kind of started this is we started off our staff meetings every Wednesday having people bring artifacts that reflect them. And when we first started it, they said, well, what do you want me to bring? And we really talked about, like, who are you? What's made your identity? Where have you been? We all have this journey that we've been on, and even though we work with each other every single day, we don't always know what that journey is. Just like our students, we don't know all their journeys and how they got there. We started with each other. We wanted to figure out where we got, how we've gotten here and what it looks like. And so it started off as a really short sharing, and I think last week most of us were crying, and it was about 40 minutes as we really got to know each other. We got to hear their story, how they're here, what their beliefs are. When you bring those artifacts to the table, you really are speaking to what beliefs you function underneath. And it's been so awesome to just see the relationships that are built and the vulnerability that can happen when you tell your story to other people. And that's really what we've been trying to model as a staff. And what's been interesting, I feel like, is teachers have been then saying too, gosh, I want to do more of this with my kids. I want to hear who they are. I want to hear their story. And once you've kind of done it with adults, it's a little bit easier to do it with kids, I think, too. So it's been really interesting to see how we learn about each other and we learn about how we've created our beliefs, and we can have conversations and build off of that. So that's one of the ways we're starting on the inside.
We're also moving this into classroom counseling lessons. This year in classroom counseling, we've taken a different approach in terms of meeting the mindset and behavior standards that were outlined and adopted by the district a couple of years ago. Our work aims to empower students to learn about themselves and others in order to act to create a peaceful and just world. This work is grounded in civic educational scholarship, see Swalwell 2015. We've engaged in authentic reflection, analysis, and learning. Through an examination of ways that people have been or are marginalized by systems, we're realizing together that it's not an individual act that creates inequity, but a long-standing history of oppression. Most importantly, we are learning that we all have power to some degree, and we can use our platforms to speak up and support others. As advocates for each other, we are stronger together. One of the most powerful examples of this was during a lesson when we put a garbage can in front of a series of desks. And actually, at this point in time, it had been for Iowa assessments, so the desks were kind of arranged in these nice little rows. And then I set the trash can in the front, and I gave everyone a piece of paper, and they had to crumple it up. And I said, okay, you represent the United States of America. Your opportunity to access wealth and privilege in this country is to make the basket. And so, of course, those who were in the front made the basket. Everyone was cheering for them. And then as it proceeded, and the rows behind them started to throw and try to shoot and try to score, it became more difficult. And some students were saying things like, well, I can't even see the basket. Somebody's in front of me. Somebody's in my way. So-and-so is blocking my view. And I said, oh, sorry, you have to stay seated. You can't move. And so then as we progressed through the lesson, what was really fascinating to me, and this I think attests to the communities that our classroom teachers have built and some of the things that they're doing in their classrooms, and as well as some of the things the students have learned, students started saying, no, I throw it out for this person. I throw it out for this person. That's not fair. That's not just. And they threw it out for the people who were behind them. So I think learning about some of the ways that people who are closer to access have that access and can access it has been tremendous for our students' learning. Another example of this was when we used a critical lens and investigated our school setting to see what privilege and power was at play. Nicole actually had a couple of students who she might talk about a little bit later who walked around and investigated things. They noticed things about class sizes. They noticed privileges that older students had versus younger students, teachers getting a teacher's lounge. By supporting students through the process of examining something that they can all access because they all attend Sawyer, they're all in our school building, we are now examining other socially constructed institutions. Students, teachers, and staff have decided that ultimately, and I think this is really from a 3-5 lens, we will come together as learners to create a plan of social action to support our school and our community. The students will ultimately be the ones who we create the space for, that have the voice to design and guide the implementation of the project. We're also working on a library audit. I feel like I'm talking for a long time, so I'm not going to go into that right now, but it's really cool. The research is clear, though. The recommended response to closing the civic empowerment gap, helping students to know how to identify and advocate for themselves and others, and ultimately transform our world, is to focus on ensuring that our students have access to a robust civic education.
So Riley and I and another staff member, Natalie Stowe, we started Sawyer Speaks, which is a poetry group. And so the students have a platform to speak their mind, to speak their truth. And it's really awesome. We have 2 Iowa State mentors for our students, and they come in every Monday and spend an hour and a half with the students. And they're writing about like really, really powerful things, like family issues and just all the things that they've seen growing up that they don't normally get to say to adults, and they finally have a place to speak their truth. So that's pretty cool.
Yes, so we actually have a workshop coming up on Monday, March 27th at 6 at Sawyer. If you're able to attend, our mission is to support and empower students on their journey to finding and using their voices as community-based activists and accomplices in active solidarity with one another.
So as a classroom teacher, I didn't know where to start. So I thought, okay, let's start where the adults are starting. We're going to start with ourselves. So I had my students look into their identities, and we listed as many identities that we could identify with as people. And then I asked for them to cross one off. If you had to get rid of one identity, what would you get rid of? And it was really hard for them. And I asked them to cross off as many as they could until they only had one left. And they were like distraught, you know. And I said, yeah, like if you have to hide something like that, if people don't get to see those identities, or if people make fun of those identities, what does that feel like, you know? And just crossing it off is just a minor, you know, we don't really get rid of that when you cross it off, but when someone makes fun of it or you're not able to share it, that's very it impacts your life a lot. So we made this quilt. So these are like little squares from our quilt with our identities. I asked them to put the biggest part of their quilt was the one that they kept. So, you know, the student kept kind, and here's another example. But it was really interesting, and we read some other articles from people that talk about how they hide it because they were embarrassed when they were growing up in school, and now that as adults they wish they would have embraced that part of their identity more. Another thing that I try to do in my classroom is provide many materials like books and any like if we're learning about scientists of color, you know, so students don't see just people that are white. as scientists and doctors and scholars. I think they should see everybody in that light, and there are many, many, many people of color that have done many great things. I also want my students to see that kids their age take action, and Riley talked about the library audit, and that was inspired by the 1,000 Black Girl books, which was a young girl, and she realized that there weren't any books with black girls in them. So she went home and asked her mom, and she said, well, what are you going to do about it? So she started this campaign to find 1,000 black girl books that she could donate. And so my students also read Separate is Never Equal, which is, we hear a lot about segregation between blacks and whites, but we don't really hear much about the Asian or the Mexican population. And I, being Mexican, I thought it was important that my students hear about that. Because by learning about it ourselves and each other, we're going to gain empathy for one another. And so Riley's big I can statement for our school classroom counseling is, I can create a peaceful, just world, and my students are really digging into that. And I have a group of students that are reading Pay It Forward because they want to be activists as well. And what I really want to focus on, and Riley helps me with that, is students that are white should not feel guilty. They shouldn't feel guilty, but they should take their privilege, and they should help change the world for marginalized students and everyone else.
And another way that we're tapping into it too is we realize that as a school we don't have all the counter stories that our kids need to hear. So something that Sue talked about that we've started this year, and actually it's kind of been our brainchild wannabe baby for a year and a half now, but we finally made it happen. But we wanted to have a family advisory council where we could really invite all of our stakeholders to the table to play. We know that all of our families have stories to tell, and they all have things that they can contribute and teach us as educators and us as other family members. And I think that was probably the coolest part of our very first meeting, is hearing the dialogue between parents that just had recently met, that might not have known each other outside of school, encourage each other. And I think at one point somebody said, I just want to follow you everywhere you go and listen to what you say. And I think that's what we need to be saying to each other. This job of raising these kids that we're partnering with families to do is a hard job, and we need to hear everyone's story as we do this. And so this is kind of where our purpose is starting, but we really want it to be a place where all of our students are represented. We want our students to see themselves in our school, and we need help to do that. And so we're really advocating for parents to come alongside of us, tell us their stories as well, so that we can figure out where we want to go with our work and what holes we need to fill, what we need to strengthen. It was really interesting. At our first night, we asked them what learning looked like, and none of them said, I wanted my kid to have a great score on that test. They all said, I want my kids to be great humans that contribute to this world, that know how to love each other, are good friends. Those are the things that we need to remember, and we need a lot of people telling that story too, so that we can come together to serve the kids. They need us. They need us to ask the hard questions and get everybody's lens on the picture.
So that's just the beginning of our journey at Sawyer. And like I said, we're just learning and starting to take some steps, and we have a lot more that we will be doing yet this year as we continue to process as a group. But we're trying to make an impact, as I know everybody is, and we're excited for the opportunity that's in front of us. So, any other questions?
Well, first of all, thank you for a wonderful presentation, very well put together. I commend you for everything you're doing. Where do you see, I love this Family Advisory Council. What initial feedback are you hearing from parents about the shortfalls? What are they happy about that we're potentially changing?
There were lots of, it was, as we did some processing, we collected some data from our parents as far as even what they felt kind of their stories had been when they were in elementary school and their school experiences, and how that has impacted their lens on what we are doing now. And so they are very excited. We have another one in a couple more weeks at the end of March. Will be our next meeting. And everybody has, and what's been interesting is the number of families that contacted us and said, we're not able to make this first one, but we're very interested in knowing more about it, and we would also like to make sure that we're on the docket and can join next time. And we're really just trying to learn from one another. We don't have a preconceived, we are wanting to share our data, and then we're just doing some processing together about our experiences in school and having them share a little bit about their family so that we can make sure that we are starting to respond to the structures that they are saying are some hurdles that we don't necessarily see that are imposed on the school by us. And so we're just looking to find out what some of those pieces are. So it's a learning process for us. It's not anything that we kind of process when we get done and look at the data the staff or the parents have given to us, and then that's kind of been driving where we're heading next.
Other questions, comments?
Sure. I think I really commend you. Sue, you've got the staff and yourself, you've identified these things, and it looks like you're leading the way for some of our elementary schools in this endeavor. I do have a few questions. You talked about last year, that's when you identified these things. When was that, and what were the indicators, the data that made you and your staff say, okay, we need to address some of these things?
One of the components that I think has been really nice is we're getting clearer with our data more so than ever before. Dan Andrews isn't here tonight, but he's able to help us break out that data in ways that I haven't ever had the opportunity. And we sat down with some of our instructional leadership team, and I remember we were sitting in the Sawyer art room, Camp Sawyer art room, and we were combing through this data, and there were some information there that we could not ignore. And we started looking at it, and we were sitting there thinking, okay, boy, I'm not a novice, good 25 years in education, and all the things that we've been told is going to have an impact, we're having an impact, but it's not getting to all. And that's where we started looking at that data a little bit more, and then when we started to break it down, and like I said, Dan's work has been incredible. I know the other buildings are doing the same work too. And we're really trying to dig in and say, what groups do we need to help support and how do we do that? So that's kind of where that information came from. It was FAST data, it was Iowa assessments, all of those things, but we were able to look at it in ways that we haven't been able to before by some of the ways that Dan has been able to show that data.
Okay, great. And then, you talked about some of the initiatives that you guys have talked about. Of those, which ones have you implemented already? Some of the professional development? Is that true?
We started with the professional development. Like I said, we have the April 20th. The artifact sharing, which we think is that opportunity for us to learn about one another and the community, that happens every Wednesday when we are together. That starts every one of our meetings. At the beginning of the year, educational leadership also had some articles that we've shared out and looked into as some of the just beginning understanding of the fact that there is a cultural proficiency area. That needed to be addressed, and so we read articles as a staff and started to have those discussions. The professional development is only beginning in that realm as far as at Sawyer, but we're ready to dig in more and excited to hear of a 3-year plan that we are going to be digging into a little bit more with and getting that guidance and support.
Great. My last question is related to the restorative justice that you had. Have you started that? Because I was involved with a little bit of restorative justice when I taught middle school.
When we say we started that, we are learning about it and looking at, one of the pieces that we realized is that our data was not on behavior issues. We weren't collecting our data as clearly as what we wanted to. Nicole's been helping me with that whole process of streamlining the different forms of ways that we are collecting that. I think the middle school and high school are at least way ahead of Sawyer in that aspect because we were still doing some paper copies and things, and some things were going into Infinite Campus, some were getting not being placed in there, and so we were, as a building, of looking at what does our data tell us, then we're able to, or what does that information tell us, and that's when we took a look at it and said, boy, we're starting to see a little bit of a gap. We need to streamline what our data looks like and then start responding, and so Nicole's been doing a little bit more learning about the restorative justice, and we are going to be taking steps with that next.
Great. Like I said, I've had a little bit of experience with
That's
it.
where I think we all are.
It's a really good option.
Right.
It really does help out. So, okay, thank you.
I want to thank you for your presentation tonight and hearing about all the different things that you're working on. What are the things that the board can do to support and encourage the things you're doing? Obviously, this is one elementary, and I know there's this 3-year plan that was mentioned earlier, but are there things from our perspective that we can do to support your efforts?
I think some of the pieces that you already, I'm going to answer first, and then I'll turn the mic over. That whole component of helping us reach out to the community, that's kind of what we were looking at too with that family advisory. We know that it's not enough to try to solve the problem on our own. We don't pretend to have all the answers. And so to help us know that we're going to have a 3-year focus on this, to be able to dig deeper and to help walk along this journey with us, because we just want to learn and grow in the area. So if you will walk along with us in the learning process and help us implement those things, I think that's some of the first steps that we have. Anybody else read it?
Well, I just want to say, yeah, I agree. Like joining us in our growth and be okay with being uncomfortable, because that's the first step to growing. Yeah.
And I would also say I know that this work has been done at other districts in Iowa. Nicole and I have taken some time to talk with people about what has worked well, what hasn't worked well in those districts. And one of the things we found is that when there's a rush or there's a push to get it done because it's just another thing that needs to happen to cross it off the list, it's not as effective, it's not as powerful, it doesn't bring people along, and it doesn't give them the chance to truly understand themselves and what they need. So I would say allowing time for that and allowing it to be intentional in the process would be what I would really call for, and I think all of us as staff members and educators would appreciate.
The concept that it isn't going to be the rest of this year. We talked, on Friday of last week and said a commitment of 3 years means a lot to us. This isn't going to be something that's going to fly by. We're committed to it. And knowing that that commitment's there means a lot to us.
And one more thing, I would also add that also it's not a process that finishes. It's a process that we continue moving on, continue understanding, knowing that the journey is never over.
Thank you. That was one thing we discussed on Friday during our meeting, so
Well, and just to add on that a little bit too, I think we have some members of our communities, like Dr. Spikes, who's had a lot of experience with this, that would, if we continue to have these assets that can come in and help us, I think whenever we get a different lens on what's going on, that helps us grow and helps us take a whole nother lens we haven't thought about before. So just, again, your encouragement for that in this process that will never end. It would be great.
I think Dr. Spikes has asked the board actually to participate in this, so.
He's amazing.
I just want to
maybe
say
you just-
thank you.
Oh, go ahead, Rodney. Go ahead.
To see that we're implementing a program like this in an elementary school is amazing, considering that there are still colleges and universities across this country that are trying to figure out how to do it. I think we're getting ahead of the curve, and I think it's going to be a benefit to the future of this country, this community, and society as a whole. When we look at diversity and we always think about the things that we can see, the reality of diversity is that, we are as different as we are the same, regardless of what we see on the outside. It's the experiences that we have in our life growing up, be it through religion, family, culture, whatever it may be, that determine our outcome on how we view things and how we work. And understanding those similarities and differences helps bring us together. So it's wonderful to see that we're trying to do that now, because we're really looking at the long term, I think, by starting this in our elementary building.
I need to write you a note. I think maybe you just answered my question that I was thinking of, but correct me if I'm wrong, but in the Teaching and Learning Committee Friday, we had a short update on the 3-year plan. Is there any concern where you have already jump-started some of this in Sawyer of that 3-year plan slowing down the process or being a roadblock inside your school, or will it continue to just build for you while the rest of the district is getting up to speed with that?
Well, and I know we're the only building. It's happening across the district,
Yes.
in various populations and in various ways. But that's one component that I don't see as a hurdle, because once again, we're working as a community. And so what have we done? And we can learn from one another, because what Pam's doing at the middle school, I can bring that into our work at Sawyer and vice versa. So it's really an opportunity for us just to collaborate together and talk through and start moving those plans forward, not in that anybody's going to come up with something that's going to say, boy, you need to step away from the work that you've been doing, in my lens. I think it's an opportunity for us just to learn from one another.
I think Dr. Spikes, and Pam is back there, we got iced out on that one on January 16th, right? Dr. Spikes is going to start working with the middle school when the ice storm hit and got canceled out.
Well, our goal is, of course, to have every student proficient and that there not be a large gap. Several things about this bother me a little bit,
Okay.
but probably the reason it bothers me is because this is an experiment. Nobody's given us any data that says this program is going to do anything to change the achievement gap. So we're really in an experiment, right?
I don't see it as, when we start talking about meeting the needs of all kids, I look at it as, it's just like our instruction, when we talk about explicit instruction, the goal of putting those things into place is to impact based on research what they know works best for our kids. But there are some kids that it doesn't close the gap for. So just with the same, with our cultural proficiency, there's a lot of components there that we are trying to address. It's not just, there's gender, there's all different components that we need to take a look at. And we just know that we've got to close the gap more. So is it research proven? I think that the statement is yes, that it has been. And we can take a look at that, and Dr. Spikes can give you more information on that process.
I'm not comfortable asking for help from an organization that I know nothing about. So, as I understand, we're asking somebody named Inclusive Ames to be involved in this. I don't know who they are or what they do.
So Inclusive Ames is, and I don't want to speak for them because I think I see their name on the list. I would say they brought some concerns to me, and then I brought it to the board leadership. So it is a group of individuals from the community who have expressed concerns about the racial disparities in the school district. So their intent and desire, and again, I don't want to speak for them, but my understanding of their desire is to bring individuals who are knowledgeable, who are professors at Iowa State, maybe it's organizations within our community, to the table to share experiences, but also then share in their research of what they have learned about what are those proven methods out there to reach all kids. I'm going to let them speak a little more about that and maybe share their concerns and kind of what they desire to bring to the table. Our desire, and Dr. Taylor could certainly address this, but our desire was to bring these individuals to the table so we can have a conversation with the community, because this really is a community issue of how we are taking care of our youth.
I'd like to add to that, and I'm not going to speak regarding Inclusive Ames. Briefly, they're a grassroots organization that sprung up in November-ish and brought a group of people together to express some concerns about the community. So again, they're going to be speaking to us shortly, so I'll let them speak that. But I really want to counter what you said regarding not an experiment. This is not an experiment. This is an issue of racial disparities and achievement that goes throughout the country. And there are many, many examples of good research that have been done on programs that are successful. And we just need to look at those programs and bring that expertise to our district to address them. But to say that this is unsolvable or that we're just experimenting with our students is, I think, inaccurate.
Well, first of all, I didn't say it was unsolvable. So quote me correctly, okay? Second, if it's not an experiment, how come we're not doing it in every school immediately? If this is a proven program, why aren't we doing it everywhere immediately? This is an experiment where we should be doing it everywhere. Every school in the country should be doing it.
Part of what we got here is one person.
I'm not done yet.
Okay.
I also find it bothersome that we're talking about restorative justice. Restorative justice is justice where a sovereign allows the victim to select the remedy. And it only works when the sovereign has complete power over both the victim and the accused. So let me give you an example. The famous stories are American natives where someone murdered another in the tribe. The sovereign then had the right to also kill the murderer or take the murderer to the family and let the family elect the remedy. So restorative justice is allowing the victim to elect the remedy. This means that there will be grossly disproportionate penalties for infractions because the victim gets to choose. Who is the victim in most infractions in school? The victim in most infractions is the school itself. We're supposed to be operating under a system presently of punishment, deterrence, and rehabilitation. So if you think about that, speeding is a great example. So if you speed 1 mile an hour over, what's your punishment? You pay a $12 fine. The deterrence, no big deal, you pay the fine. The rehabilitation, really not much. If you're speeding 25 miles an hour over, the punishment is lose your driver's license. So you've got punishment, you've got deterrence because you can use your license. And if you do lose your license, you then have rehabilitation. So that's a proven model, and that's the reason that we don't have rehabilitative justice throughout the entire criminal justice system. Because the model of restorative justice requires that the victim elect the remedy. So I would be very careful about that. To summarize, there is no question that we have students, and within the students that are not being as successful as they should be, and within the universe of students that are not as successful as there should be, we see disproportions between races. So we have to do something, no question about it. I just want to be sure that the time and effort is something that we can learn from and in fact does benefit rather than just have the appearance of propriety. I don't want an appearance program, I want a successful program. That's why I'm asking if there is data to prove that this actually is going to do something for us. Thank you.
I'm not familiar about the data. It's, Riley, did you say something about research relative to this?
Yes, I did quote Dr. Katie Swalwell, 2015. She wrote Minding the Civic Engagement Gap. She is a professor at Iowa State University, and she has done extensive research. She wrote a book called Educating Activist Allies, where she looked at specifically suburban, urban neighborhoods where the majority of students who are white or of privileged status have this access to a robust civic educational curriculum, and then in turn, how those students were prepared and also how their staff was prepared. So I hope that at some point, I'm under the impression that she may be working with Dr. Spikes.
And I'd add for you, Director Talbot, just I know part of the plan is that some aspects of this will come back to the Teaching and Learning Committee, and we can certainly ask for more of that data to back that up. There would be the plan would be before entering into the official contract with Iowa State or with Dr. Spikes that it would come through on the consent agenda. So the documentation to back this would be provided at that time. So if we don't have exact data to your satisfaction or mine or anybody's, I mean, that can be, we've got the time to do that because this is not on the action items tonight. We're not signing a contract in any way, so.
And maybe something to clarify. Sawyer has been on the agenda or the plan to do this cultural proficiency presentation
Weeks.
for a while. Yes. Okay, because we asked each of our schools, and this is clarification for everyone, each of our schools, if you look at our agendas, each of our schools are going to come and they're going to present something maybe they're proud about or something that they want us to learn more about as a board. So they've been doing this cultural proficiency work. In addition, our district, of which Sue and Jonas presented to TLC on Friday, they are working with Dr. Spikes on working with this 3-year plan. And we're being very vague because they are just really kind of starting to work on it. I've only been discussed it for one 30-minute section. So that's all taking place. Inclusive Ames brought concerns to us, and that was in the email chain that you, I believe Dr. Taylor put here, that the district administration said, yes, we'll sit with you because you are bringing community groups with these concerns to us. So I want to make sure everybody understands these are two different things. Inclusive Ames isn't coming in to help Sawyer work on their cultural proficiency. These two things just happen to coincide this evening. So if that helps maybe to clarify.
Since you brought up the timing of some of this, I would ask, and as a person on crutches, ice days are high on my list to pay attention to. So this ice day that we lost, I mean, a few years ago, we did take steps to build extra professional development days in if we lost days. What is the plan for reacquiring that day with Dr. Spikes and middle school?
Still negotiating that, and as a matter of fact, we were looking at that. The ice day has to be made up by staff on the first day following the end of classes, so that's what we were hoping to do. He's a busy guy, however, and so trying to get that worked out may be a little bit more difficult from what I understand. But we're just in the infancy stages of trying to put that together, not necessarily district-wide. But the other thing I wanted to point out is I know that Spence at the high school and Pam at the middle school are going to see Dr. Chance Lewis, who also deals with more of a practical side, which is coming back towards strategies, instructional strategies, and et cetera, in helping work with minority students that he's had some success with. So they're going to go visit him, bring that information back to us too. The real plan with Dr. Spikes is hopefully to establish a 3-year plan, at least 3 years. It's going to take that long, of cultural proficiency throughout the district. And it's just going to, we're just in infancy stages with that. The ice storm didn't help us much.
Thank you.
So I'm encouraged. I think the dialogue is fantastic. I'm glad we're reaching out and making those connections. So thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you. Moving on to our next item tonight is the public forum. We have 8 people wishing to speak. Residents of the district, students attending the district, parents or guardians of students attending the district. District staff may address the board about any topic relevant to the district, whether on the current agenda or not. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speakers' participation is limited to 3 minutes once per board meeting. The views and opinions of citizens addressing the board do not necessarily reflect those of the board, district administration, or staff. We ask speakers to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees or students or their performance. Student speakers will state their name and school. Others will state their name and address. First, we have Edna Clinton.
Good evening. My name is Edna Young Clinton, and I live at 1610 Carroll Avenue in Ames, Iowa, for the last 53 years. Thank you for allowing the forum. I serve as the president of the Ames NAACP branch. Our national organization has established 5 game changers, of which education is one for the 21st century. We continue to be dedicated to ensuring that all of our children receive a high-quality public education. In making my comments, which might come a little late considering the presentation we just had, I want to acknowledge that there are positive things happening in the Ames School District. However, we have not risen to the challenge of providing an educational environment where all students reach their potential. There is a need for the school board and the administrators to set the reduction of the number of African American and Latino students who underperform as a priority. Setting their needs as a priority speaks to what it means to be responsive to the needs of students who may not have your experiences, your access to resources, or your cultural identity. I am not hearing language that speaks to solutions that will assist these students in gaining the most from their in-school time and how the system will hold itself co-responsible for the improvements in their performance, which result in them being on par with their white cohorts. It is my hope that you will reach outside of the school's paid employees, the school board, and into the communities to individuals and other organizations to seek allies in the pursuit of better practices and aspirations that help all of us talk about the achievements of African American and Latino students with the same enthusiasm that we talk about white students. The need for action is urgent. And if you want to know how to help children that don't reflect you succeed, then go to the population that can help you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Anaki Mundo.
Do I need to state who I am again?
Yeah, please.
Okay, for the record. It's been a while since I've been here. In fact, never in this building, but used to see me a lot. I'm Annika Mundell, 1111 Harding, here in Ames, Iowa. Lived here for a good long while. First of all, thank you all for your service to the board and for your commitment to Ames schools. I also want to thank Dr. Ross, Dr. Taylor, and Elisa for your opening comments. My name is Annika, as I mentioned. I'm a mom, an educator, and a member of the apparently much talked about new youth and schools focused action team of Inclusive Ames. Our action team, to give you a little background, consists of 30 active members and growing, seems like on a daily basis, including parents, educators, researchers, and other concerned community members. We are a group that is passionate about social justice in education. But we do want to be clear that we do not have all the answers, and we also are not the first to raise these concerns. Long-standing groups such as the NAACP Ames branch, and Edna Clinton, we're delighted you're here, Ames, and other groups, as well as parents and grandparents, have really laid the groundwork and raised these questions, and we see them still as critical participants in these conversations. So here's my prepared piece. You know from our recent email that our group is concerned about existing racial disparities in the district on a number of different indicators: academic achievement, enrollment in gifted and talented programming, enrollment in advanced science and math courses, in and out of school suspension, and in other areas. While the Ames Middle School was in the press recently for its 36% proficiency gap between black and white students, the publicly available data that we have reviewed indicates that those disparities are, in fact, a challenge district-wide. And I know that you've seen our fact sheet, but for the public, it's available on inclusiveames.org website, and we compiled some of the data that we were bringing to the board. As a result of the district-wide racial disparities, we are requesting an intentional district-wide response. We are heartened by the efforts of individuals, including teachers, building administrators, and others. At the same time, we believe the disparities will be best addressed, to echo Ms. Clinton, if there is a concerted and coordinated response across schools and classrooms. So to this end, we respectfully suggest 3 actions. First, we ask critically that the district publicly and visibly acknowledge that significant racial and ethnic disparities do exist in Ames schools. One way would be to bring these up in an agenda item at the school board meeting or potentially in a school board resolution. Second, we ask that you engage in a public process of eliciting input from all stakeholders, including school personnel, students, parents, and community members of the various racial and ethnic groups. Finally, we ask that the district make closing the achievement gap and eliminating other racial disparities a priority. We suggest that your focus may include, but should not be limited to, ongoing professional development for staff, including implicit bias training, and reviewing and revamping disciplinary policies. We certainly welcome the dialogue that has begun with the district board members and administration, and we look forward to further discussions on ways that we, and again, importantly, our other allied groups and the broader community can support a district-wide response. We know, as we hope you do, that tackling racial disparities is very complex, yet it is imperative that we not turn away. These inequities impact all learners, and they really impact all of us, regardless of our race and ethnicity. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Thomas Andre.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the board. My name is Thomas Andre. I live at 225 Wildflower Drive in Ames. I've been here for about 40 years. I participate in Ames, the Mid-Iowa Organization Strategy, and Ames is Central Iowa-wide. And members of the Ames cohort have expressed the same concerns I'm going to express today. Again, I'm going to speak to discipline as opposed to achievement and discrepancies in, or disparities in, the rates at which kids are disciplined in the Ames schools. And I distributed a handout to you. I'm just going to talk briefly about the first page because it repeats, I think, something that we mostly all understand. It looks at the use of suspension, in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, and expulsion, which are relatively rare in Ames, by different ethnic groups, Hispanics, blacks, and whites. And as you can see, the rates of involvement in suspension, expulsion are much higher for African Americans and whites, and Hispanics than they are for whites. The data are plotted in a funny way. It's essentially, I took the proportion of the population that was suspended, population in the schools, and divided it by the population of whites that were suspended. And essentially what that tells you, how much more likely is a child to be suspended as compared to a white child. So roughly, the chance of being suspended as a black child is 5 times as high as the chance of being suspended as a white child. Okay, so that simply expresses discrepancies that I think we all understood and knew about. And I want to say that I'm very pleased by tonight's meeting and the coincidence of hearing the Sawyer talk with raising these issues. I think we need to make a commitment in Ames to reduce this issue, and I think the school board needs to make a commitment to keep it on its front agenda. That's what I'm asking you to do. I think that what I'm hearing is the process is beginning, and I want to take, and Amos wants to recognize that Amos worked with the Des Moines schools to develop a restorative justice program that's been shown to be effective in reducing kids dropping out of school and staying with their education. And apparently we're beginning to use that program in the middle school in Ames, or at least experiment with it. So that's very positive, I think. I guess what I would like to say, just to end, is I think it's going to be a long-term effort to change the culture of the schools and change so that we are more positive and provide more equitable opportunities. And I think the board needs to make a commitment to stay on this over some period of years, to keep monitoring the issue and to make sure that we are working to resolve this problem. I will point out in the handout you got, there are a couple of websites that might be useful to the board and to the district in looking at that. There's a federal government website that deals with suspensions and discipline. And there's a website from the Justice Center Council of State Governments called the School Discipline Consensus Report. And I found that particularly interesting in that it talks about effective programs that have been shown by data to be effective, but it also talks about a process by which a district can begin to make changes. And I think it'd be worthwhile to look for the school district to look at that report just for that aspect of it, because they say things like you've got to involve all the stakeholders. You've got to do an assessment of what stakeholders' perceptions of the district are like. So I just recommend that to the board as at least one source of continuing this process that I'm very glad is beginning in Ames. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Andre, I have a quick question. You're concerned about the disciplinary and the expulsions being higher. Why are you specifically concerned about that? What is the concern that Amos has for it later leading to?
The data suggests that suspension is not an effective way of dealing with discipline issues, that other ways lead to better results for both the school and the student. And suspensions from in-school suspensions tend to be correlated with later out-of-school suspensions and then later expulsions. And sometimes people have called that the school-to-prison pipeline. And I think we ought to try to stop that pipeline from flowing as much as possible. And so what we can do to keep kids in school and learning is more effective than not allowing them the opportunity to learn. And I say that saying there are discipline issues that every school encounters that have to be dealt with, but the reports I mentioned suggest alternative ways of dealing with discipline that may be more effective. That's why.
Quick question then, because, and Dr. Taylor, you might chime in on this too. Since we're talking about the suspension and then the word expulsion, I've been paying attention to this. I was one of those weird people that watched every school board meeting before I got on this board, and I watched every city council meeting before I got on this board. Now I don't watch city council anymore. But I don't remember the seeing expulsions, and so I want to check on that. Am I missing something? Do we have and is that broken out in the data at all too? And Dr. Taylor, can you chime in on when the last one was, or
I think
what
you
our history
mentioned
is?
it. To my knowledge, I've been here 25 years. I think we've had one.
Yeah,
correct? In 25 years.
The federal data are collected on in-school suspensions, out-of-school suspensions, and expulsions. And all I did was total those to get an overall rate.
Yeah.
I did look at the Ames data, and there are, I don't know if it's only one, but there were relatively few expulsions in Ames. I know it's, I think, 0 at the elementary school level, and there may have been a few at the higher level.
Doesn't change the problem. Doesn't change the identifying the problem, and I appreciate that. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing something there.
No.
I remember one in like 1980 where somebody set a smoke bomb off in the high school, and I was there, and he got expelled. But I think that's the last one I ever remember.
I guess I saw it as the summing of that is sort of capturing the pipeline.
Yeah.
That's.
I suppose I just want to add one statement to that, and that is I remember a few years ago having a conversation at the board table with regards to how we handle discipline of our students, and I remember being very clear at that time that the goal of the administration was to move away from out-of-school suspensions except for the most egregious of situations. So I think it's important to note and remember that we are and have been working towards trying to find alternatives to the suspension process.
Yeah, and I strongly support those efforts. So, but it's clear that there have been in-school suspensions and out-of-school suspensions in Ames, and it's clear that they're occurring at different rates for different races.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Angela Shaw.
Angela Shaw, 1707 Duff Avenue. Thank you for allowing me to speak. So I am sitting before you as one of those parents that is in that 36.2% difference. Let me give you a little bit of background about my daughter, who is now a freshman in Ames. We arrived here in 4th grade. My child was labeled as a gifted and talented student. She came from an exemplary status, 38 years straight, magnet school. On the Texas exams, she scored 2 to 3 grades higher in math, science, reading, and social studies. Fast forward, she has been in the school district now for 7 years, and she is struggling in math and science in the school district. Not fundamentals that she learned in Texas, but fundamentals she should have learned in Ames Middle School. You have failed, my child. My family is a middle class, upper middle class. I came here recruited for Iowa State. I am a microbiologist. I have a PhD. I value education. My family has invested thousands of dollars in tutors. Tutor at my house right now working on math. We average about an hour. So to hear the comments in the January meeting were beyond disturbing. This perception of me not caring as a parent, me not investing as a parent, shameful. Shameful. To hear the comments of you not encouraging, or I should back up, and Mandy Ross not encouraging diversity, talking about our community and not seeing diversity or the increase in diversity as beautiful. In addition to that, saying we raise our children different. Me, I raise my children different than anybody else in this community. We vacation. We're middle class. How am I different on how I raise my children? And then the biggest thing that hurt me was the silence. The silence on each one of your, nothing came out of your mouth. So there's a lot of service going for it today, but when those comments just rolled off the tongue, because I believe what's in your heart, you speak, there was silence. So I love the fact that you have action items. I encourage that. I want to see how you guys are progressing with this action plan. And then coming from, as a professor, I want to see milestones. I want to see what are your targets that you will be going towards. Because I have a preschooler now that's about to enter into Ames Middle School, and we're questioning whether we need to go to Gilbert or Ankeny, because I don't trust Ames right now. I have a student who's struggling, and she came in exemplary status, gifted and talented. Why? Thank you.
Next, we have Cheryl Benz. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Benz? Okay. Okay, sorry about that.
Thank you. Very powerful speaker just before me. My name is Cheryl Benson. I live at 707 Burnett. Born and reared in Ames, graduated from Ames High School many years ago, and I am here to talk about a slightly different topic. When I planned to come this evening, it was the intent to ask this board to vote in favor of a resolution affirming its commitment to a safe and supportive school environment for all students, regardless of citizen status and immigration status. That resolution is not on the agenda this evening. I understand that. And I also understand that it's now going to be a month before the next meeting. And from my point of view, that's an unfortunate delay. I understand that that's just the way it is. But this is an urgent situation. It's time sensitive. There's a lot happening fast. So that being said, there are already policies that this board has adopted to make our district safe and welcoming. I refer to policy KK, which is visitors to the school, policy KR, which is public conduct on school premises. If you read those policies, they're really well written, and it's definitely intended to make the school a safe environment. So this resolution, which I'm hoping and asking that will be on the agenda for March 27th, I hope, and also I'm asking that all of the directors of the school board are able to support it, because it's another policy that will continue to make our schools safe and welcoming for all citizens, regardless of status or immigration status. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next we have Eileen Sullivan.
Good evening. I'm Eileen Sullivan. I live at 2609 Somerset Drive here in Ames. I'm here tonight to say thank you. On behalf of the Ames Education Association, I do want to express our sincerest thanks to each of you for your vote of confidence in the public educators of the Ames Community School District. I'm joined tonight by members of our association, school teachers, who wish to express their thanks as well. Ratifying our master contract agreement for the next 2 school years means a great deal to us, as this provides a much appreciated stability in these difficult times. Our district has transcended the politics of the day to best serve our most important constituents, the students of this district. I also appreciate that you took extra time for an extra meeting to make sure the ratification happened. I am very appreciative of Dr. Taylor, Dr. Ross, and Ms. Stenzlen, as we once again were able to put our heads together and work toward a solution during our negotiations process. And a nod to my negotiating team, Tom Borer, Mark Jurgensen, Charlene Mason, and Craig Sengbush, who helped work toward an agreement as well. So thank you again for your support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next we have Kurt Schmaltz.
My name is Kirk Schmaltz. I live at 2303 Hayes. I've been in this community for the last 33 years, teacher at the high school. And I just wanted to, it doesn't take very long to say thank you. Our negotiation team did an excellent job, and with all the talk of the collective bargaining, and to see the board and the 2 negotiation teams come together as one, and to see and provide stability for our district for the next 2 years. Anytime you have stability in your community and you can see how 2 parties can work together and come up with the best solution, it doesn't take very long to say thank you. All of you are giving your independent time to make this district better as teachers and community members. So as I tell my students in my class all the time, it takes like 4 or 5 seconds to say thank you, and so we don't do it enough. So I wanted to echo my thoughts to the negotiation team and the board, and thank you for giving us stability for the next 2 years.
Thank you. And last we have Jeanette Colton.
Good evening. My name is Jamet Colton. I live at 2226 Northwestern Avenue. I'd like to speak regarding item 30 on the agenda tonight. I'm encouraged by the district's willingness to discuss posting board committee agendas, including time and location, by more than the state's minimum 24-hour advance notice, by setting a higher standard that also includes posting to the district website. It shows a desire to reach out to the community and not just include, but actively engage. It helps to build a level of trust, openness, and inclusiveness that aligns well with the passions and expectations of a community as engaged and involved as ours. Thank you.
Thank you. Who you want to talk to?
Would you mind adding my name to that list? This is my first time, so I didn't know I needed to add it. Good for you guys probably, but it's my first time. My name is Matthew Goodman, and I just wanted to share some thoughts. My address is 2019 Friley Road, right behind Elisa Franson. I want to share some perspectives on behalf of the Ames Progressive Alliance, of which I am one of the 2 co-chairs. Carrie Katz is in the back. She's another co-chair, and there are many members in the audience. As one of those co-chairs, the APA was formed to leverage community resources for progressive priorities. Over time, it has become strikingly clear that the community resource that has been under-leveraged here more than any other is our people. Amazing neighbors who have knowledge, passions, experiences, and perspectives that we haven't brought to bear on the challenges of our community enough. Inclusive Ames, an outgrowth of APA's work to empower every last member of our community, has been incredibly successful at reversing this trend and continues to empower many new members of our community. I'd like to thank you, the board, for your efforts in making the Ames community better. APA understands you have 2 exciting opportunities before you in the near future and wanted to add our support to these endeavors. Number 1, in addition to those 2, just wanted to thank Mandy Ross, Louis Rosser, and Elisa Franson for attending an APA Pint Night back in May, a long time ago, to talk about literacy. It was an opportunity for our members to connect with the board members and staff to understand the conversations you're having on literacy, which gives them the sense that they are connected to those conversations and gives you an opportunity to hear their words, which of course should shape your behaviors, right? That's what we're doing. Number 2, the APA would like to encourage the board to move swiftly on key elements of the Inclusive Ames Youth and Schools Action Team recommendations. Namely, add an agenda item in the near future to both publicly acknowledge the significant racial and ethnic disparities that exist in Ames and begin addressing them. In addition to that, engage in a public process of eliciting input from all the stakeholders, including school personnel, students, parents, community members, and various racial and ethnic groups. A third thing is make closing that achievement gap and eliminating other racial disparities a district priority. We suggest that this focus may include, but should not be limited to, committing to ongoing district-wide and building-specific professional development of all staff, which includes implicit bias training. APA supports all these efforts. One other element we'd like to talk about, work that you may be doing in the future, is that we want to thank Board Director Louis Rosser for bringing forward the resolution for a safe, supportive school environment. And we encourage you to support it by ensuring it appear on the March 27th agenda and by passing it that evening. And this now, Luke, I don't know if I have to say it all again, but this is going to be just from me, not APA, okay? In closing, I want to remind you that the work you do, it can be so important. For the longest time, I saw so many elements of the work done on council, like that of school board, as venerable. Bids, properties, equipment, contracts, pools, new buildings, and the like. These decisions are valuable, but quality answers to simple questions do not change lives. Your greatest power lives in the scale of the questions you demand be answered. The questions you ask once, the questions you ask twice, the questions you ask 3 times, and do not release until they are fully explored. In this commitment to understanding and its natural evolution into actions of change, this is the space in which you will do your most rewarding work. I see tonight that the Ames Community School District is asking important questions cautiously, but I worry we do not have time for subtle or slow or safe. When you see achievement gaps, I would ask that you behave exactly how you would if the number represented your own kids' challenges. How quickly would you respond? How hard would you work? How late would you stay up? How much money would you spend? How many phone calls would you make? How many websites would you visit? How many tears would you shed? When would you stop? I claim never. You would never stop. I am asking, as long as you sit in these seats, that you never stop. These kids, while you hold these seats, they are your kids. For some of them, you are their greatest hope for success. You cannot settle. You cannot wane. You must do what you would do for your own children. Everything possible and anything necessary. Every year that we accept achievement gaps based on race without broad, bold, district-wide solutions, we fail our kids. I know Ames. It is a community unwilling to settle for anything less than empowering every last individual, and this is the power you have. The only action you need to take to harness this power for good is to demand answers to the questions and accept nothing but solutions that move the needle. If the Ames Community School District, with all its resources, cannot answer these questions, what district possibly can? It is time to lead, and I have no doubt that you are ready to do so. Thank you very much.
All right, closing the public forum. And moving on to the next discussion item, update on Phase 1 of the high school.
I think for some of the board members who weren't on the facility committee, Sam brought extra copies of the Phase 1 study. It's rather extensive, but I believe we also sent that out electronically for those that could make access to it. For Sam, you're on your own.
All right. Thank you very much.
Could we take just a 30-second break for people for all the people that are clearing out before you start? I just so we can all
Sounds good.
Distract that attention, please.
Not a problem.
We are back, so we'll start on our next discussion item, the update to the high school project.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Sam Stagg with Hala Architecture, representing who is the Phase 1 Design and Construction Management Team of Hala Architecture, Skidmore, Owens and Merrill Architecture, KCL Engineers, Snyder Associates, Civil Engineers and Landscape Architects, and TOK Construction Management.
You may want to move that microphone just a little.
Oh, excuse me. Is that good? Okay.
Better.
Okay. So tonight, I want to do a couple of things. You received in your board packet the report for Task 1, which is the assessment of the existing school site and building. And I've also handed out hard copies of that. And so what I wanted to do is give you a quick verbal overview of what we found under Task 1. And if you want to follow along, there's some of this in the executive summary. I also want to give a quick overview of Task 2, which is the high school phase or task of this Phase 1 process. So I want to jump right in and start talking about site things, and I'll just segue right into the Task 2 items as well. So regarding the property, the high school site is located on 70 plus minus acres owned by the school district. The west half of the property consists of timber, drainage way, and 27 acres of prairie. That prairie was entered into a lease for a 49-year lease with the Iowa chapter of Nature Conservancy, and it will expire in 2019. Parking lots and pavement. The parking stall count at the high school is 782 stalls and accommodates the current population of a little over 1,300 students, and actually can accommodate nearly most of the targeted enrollment of 1,600. We're only 18 stalls short if we get to the 1,600 student target. One of the problems on the site regarding parking lot and pavement is the site access. It's relatively congested and it's considered a problem. However, there's currently a conversation going on with Iowa State and the city of Ames to investigate possibilities of extending 16th Street and or 20th Street to Staying Road to help alleviate some of this congestion. That process is ongoing, and we'll keep the board up to date as things are discovered. Regarding site utilities, existing site utilities are adequate. There's a fiber optic line that is running north and south along the west side of the high school building. That's relatively critical, and this will need to remain and be protected as it serves the building and other surrounding communities. I'll jump into some specifics of that here shortly. Stormwater management. Current systems meet the guidelines when they were built. However, the way that the current guidelines go is if there's any major renovations or changes to existing paving, we'll have to adhere to current standards, which would likely result in some relatively large detention basins and the like for any type of future improvements. Excuse me. I want to jump to a different slide here. Okay. So the slide you have in front of you is the basement floor plan, the main floor plan, and the second floor plan of the existing high school facility. The existing building consists of 15 different building units constructed over the past 56 years from 1960 to the present. In general, it began with the north green additions and worked its way south, and then ultimately ending up with the blue in 2005, which is kitchen and cafeteria. But there are 15 different buildings, 14 additions to the original building. In general, the physical condition of the existing building is considered fair to good. Majority of the exterior envelope is masonry with just minor need for tuck pointing maintenance. Jerry and his team have been knocking that off the list over the past several years. Let's see here. All of the exterior windows were replaced with energy conserving windows between 2011 and 2014. Many existing standing seam metal roofing and single ply roofs have 10 to 20 years of life expectancy, except for a small portion over the cheerleader training room and over the fine arts wing that has a ballasted single membrane rubber roof that will need to be replaced within 1 to 2 years. Likely the largest problem concerning the exterior envelope is that most of the exterior masonry walls lack insulation and perform poorly concerning energy conservation. Existing structural systems are sound and adequate for continued use. Regarding the interior physical condition, the majority of the interior materials are made of durable materials and have been well maintained. However, most of them are original to their respective buildings, once again dating back to 1960, and are in need of updating and modernizing. There's still some remaining asbestos on site, but internal processes are currently in place to have all the asbestos removed within the next few years. Physical accessibility and circulation are two of the largest problems. The way the building has been added on to over the past 56 years, there are 15 different floor elevations in the facility, and it's a kind of a sprawling, disjointed, and difficult facility to navigate in general. Security and supervision are other large problems. There are currently 83 exterior doors that need to be secured each night. And some of those doors do have electronic monitoring and access. However, all of them do not at this point. It's a cost consideration at this point. Let's see here. Also, many of the building additions cannot be closed or isolated due to egress requirements or physical constraints of the building. And so if the building happens to be open for an event, it's possible that people can navigate throughout a majority of the building uncontrolled. Some of the functional and philosophical aspects. The current enrollment of the high school is approximately just over 1,300 students with a target enrollment of 1,600. I mentioned that earlier. And so some of these next comments are based on that target amount of 1,600 students. The existing cornerstone spaces of the auditorium, gymnasium, cafeteria, and media center are considered small or too small for the target enrollment and are difficult to add on to considering their location on the site and within the building. Most classroom spaces are considered adequately sized for some of the current teaching methods and whatnot, but don't allow much for collaborative activity or a flexible use of the space. That was one of the discussions. We'd like to see them a little bit larger to accommodate some of those things in the future. Majority of the corridors and stairs are narrow and don't allow for efficient circulation. Corridors are congested between classes, and some of the trends in education now, the corridors are being used for collaborative spaces, and they're too narrow at this point to accommodate that, except for one or two corridors in the 1963 edition. Let's see here. The proximity of the larger cornerstone spaces and academic wings lack an inherent logic and are not conducive to simple circulation and wayfinding. For instance, public functions in the auditorium are only accessible through what is considered private corridors adjacent to classrooms. The sprawling and disjointed additions have created long travel distances unsupervised areas, and inefficient adjacencies, such as the decentralized location of the cafeteria and media center, as well as inefficient locations of locker rooms serving the space that they're, in proximity to the space that they're serving. Many of these functional inefficiencies have led to a less than ideal teaching and learning environment, and some philosophical shortcomings. In the report, you'll notice there's an extensive overview on what 21st century learning is. Some of the main four components are collaboration and flexibility, a natural daylighting, as well as just the appearance and feel and atmosphere of the space. So collaborative flexible spaces in classrooms are limited and lack the ability for cross-curricular teaching and learning. Natural daylight is not prevalent in every learning space, and in some locations where it is, it's relatively limited. The majority of the building is dated and institutional in its appearance and function and is in need of an interior facelift. Jumping into mechanical considerations, much of the HVAC equipment throughout the building was updated in 2005 and is in good working condition. However, some of those renovations were utilized things like exterior units and exterior ducts, and those have something of a limited lifespan for an additional maybe 10 to 15 years. The fine arts area HVAC system is mostly original to the 1970 construction, older than 40 years old, older than 40 years, and is at its end of its useful life cycle, in need of relatively soon replacement. Media and science classroom HVAC equipment is mostly original to the 1955 construction. Let's see here. No, I'm sorry, that's 1995 construction. And the condition is in average condition and is anticipated it will need upgrades within 5 to 10 years. The two chillage plants have less than 100 tons of expandable capacity, and however, they're currently adequate, but expansion would be difficult due to its location and available piping. There are 3 boiler plants with 10 to 30% expandability. Those systems appear to be in good condition at this point. The gym is currently not cooled, but is served by a newer but not necessarily the most efficient type of steam boiler. There are 3 domestic water entrances with limited ability for expansion, and there are 3 fire entrances with ability for expansion. Electrical and technology. The 3 main electrical service entrance locations have been updated and are in good conditions. However, beyond the service entry, the branch and distribution panels are part of the original construction and beyond their useful life service, particularly in the 60s, 70s, and 80s construction areas. The IBA communication network has a hub within the school. This is what I was referring to earlier with the fiber optic. This room will have to is required to have a 0 downtime for any type of maintenance done on it or any renovations nearby. Let's see here. Current data system cabling throughout the facility is an older cable and does not meet the future capacity needs of the district. In addition, due to the number of devices and bandwidth needed, the current system is nearing its capacity for delivery of service. The fire alarm system has been upgraded and is in good condition for being expandable as needed. Okay, that's task 1, existing building overview. Any questions on that particular set of facts? All right, I'm going to jump right into the task 2, which is new high school programming. So this particular portion of the project, we've teamed up with architecture firm out of Chicago, Skidmore, Owens, and Merrill, who have provided a great amount of help and service to the team in this portion of the project. So I'm going to give you a programming survey, a summary of some of the items that we've been discussing a lot with Spence and his with his team made up of the department leaders over at the high school, and so as well as Dr. Taylor, Dr. Ross, Jerry, as well and a handful of other administrators and staff. It's been a great process, by the way. We first established some guiding principles that we wanted to establish as the rails to run on throughout the process. Those guiding principles touched on 3 primary categories: learning spaces, entries and circulation, as well as adjacencies and hierarchies. Regarding learning spaces, we wanted to have flexible, agile learning spaces that need to extend beyond the classroom. We want to encourage cross-disciplinary learning. We want to have both dedicated and non-dedicated learning environments, as well as integrate students and faculty to maximize collaboration. Entries and circulation. We want to emphasize the importance of a welcoming entry and open corridors. We wanted wide circulation zones with maximum daylight, adequate daylight control. When you have windows, you got to be able to control the glare, and then also multifunctional corridor spaces to serve as learning environments. Regarding the third category, adjacencies and hierarchies, security is a high priority. So we want to maintain a clear separation of what are public programs as well as private, and I'll touch on those briefly shortly coming up here. Event spaces, auditorium, gymnasium need to be co-located, and then adjacencies to maximize cross-disciplinary and collaborative activity. We also discussed some of the spaces and their adjacencies. So this is a diagram that basically shares what spaces need to be adjacent to other spaces, whether it's academic items, media center, cafeteria, performing arts, and the proximity to the rehearsal spaces, and then well as all the athletic items associated with one another. So this summarizes some of the discussion had regarding adjacencies. Next one, we talked about program typologies, and those are organized in three different types of mindsets in terms of space and how they're allocated: public, semi-public, and private. Public are active, shared community, highly accessible spaces open to visitors in the community. These are entry lobbies, general reception areas, admin offices, pre-function spaces like lobbies, and as well as cafeterias. Semi-public is similar to public spaces, however, these are active and common, highly accessible spaces that may be open to visitors at some time, but also closed off when students are needing these spaces. These include auditorium, theater, gymnasium, media center, and some conference rooms. Regarding the private allocation, these spaces, they need flexibility to be quiet or active, shared or dedicated, and are accessible but secure, primarily to students and faculty. These include classrooms, labs, and maker spaces, faculty offices, support space programs, and also back-of-house mechanical rooms, supply rooms, things like that. We also talked about high school typologies and organizational types. These are 5 that we discussed. I'm not going to go into detail with those. The one that was selected was the split bar organization, where you enter into the public, and then on either side, you go into semi-public spaces or private spaces. Then we superimposed those diagrams over the existing high school floor plan to get an indication of size and scale of some of these generality spaces. And then we dove in just a little bit deeper and began to understand how those would be organized in this particular, which is split bar option A, where you enter into the public area more toward the north, into the dining and cafeteria, and admin, the private spaces in terms of academics and faculty offices, right in front of that entry, and then off to the side, semi-public in terms of gymnasium and performance arts. And then split bar option B, basically the entry would be a little bit further toward the south, entering into a main entry, then you have access to the semi-public zones, and then entering the public or the private areas off to the right. We also spoke briefly about classroom organization and typologies. These are 4 that we've talked about. The far left one is relatively traditional with modular rooms and single double-loaded corridors. Another one is open collectives, where you have classrooms without walls and then common learning area corridors. We also spoke about classrooms that have a common pod for collaborative learning, as well as wider circulation spaces. And then the 4th one is a kind of a mixed program. This diagram indicates 3 different ways that those can be organized within a classroom wing, so to speak. Consolidated faculty zone, integrated faculty zone, and dispersed faculty zone. I'm not going to dive into the details of that. The one that was selected by Spence and their team, as well as the administration, is a consolidated faculty zone, where The faculty will have a consolidated group of office space and workspace immediately adjacent to the classroom wing and classroom areas, but then have an integrated collaborative zone with wider corridors and plenty of a collaborative space woven and embedded into the classroom areas. So these are two different diagrams. The one on the left is a more traditional aspect where there would simply be a double-loaded corridor with a collective faculty zone adjacent to it. We've been leaning more toward the one on the right where you have the collaborative faculty zone immediately adjacent to the classroom wing. However, wider corridors as well as a collaborative work zone woven inside the collaborative classroom spaces as well. So this is the one that we're targeting and working with, that we've arrived at collectively with the administrative team and Spence's team. All right, and that takes care of task 2.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
Can you go back to the faculty organizational, couple more. There.
I'm sorry, this one here? Okay.
Yeah, I was at facilities meeting with everybody, and I thought the input from them was that they were interested in the integrated faculty zones.
Yeah, and
or did they change that, or?
It was a great clarification. No, there was a mistake in how we reported that.
Okay.
The last meeting that we had with the department leaders, Spence was not present. He was sick that day. And so we had just some miscommunication with the team that we were working with that day, and then we've since had a conversation with Spence and the leadership, and have arrived at the consolidated faculty zone. So the desire is to have all the staff be officing in one general zone. How that gets worked out yet, we'll arrive at that later, but this is the target classification.
I was just curious.
Great clarification, yep.
Ready for question and commentary?
Please, yes.
Okay. Well, at first I'll disclose my biases. It's no secret that I'm in favor of constructing a new high school. People continuously ask me, they say, why, if we can keep the kids warm and have teachers in the room, would a cheap guy like me ever propose building a new high school? And the answer is really simple. It's because we can do it without impact on taxation. Because of the low interest rates and because of the increasing value of real estate, we can do it now instead of putting money in a rat hole. So that's my bias. I just want to reveal that up front. Mike Esposette was talking about something at the committee meeting that I hadn't considered very thoroughly. And Mike was talking about the difference between a target of 1,300 and 1,600.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've been thinking about that ever since. I thought that was pretty profound, that we would be talking about a swing of millions of dollars, and we haven't had 1,600 students in the school since, help me out, Luke?
89, 98.
Since 1998. We've got 4 competing factors. We've got reduced birth rate, and offsetting reduced birth rate in Ames is concentration of population. So while overall people are having less kids, metropolitan areas are becoming more dense, so we're moving in more kids. So that's competing. We have more off-site learning with computers, but it's projected by some people, I know this isn't a popular opinion, but I kind of like it, it's projected that we can knock off the first year of college at high school by keeping the kids at the high school for 1 more year and working with community colleges and local universities, and have virtually free college for the first year. So that's competing, more off-site learning, plus the potential for more students for college. So how do we reconcile what our target is? Because if we build the cafeteria too small, it doesn't matter if we add classrooms. If we build the gym too small, it doesn't matter if we add classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first question. The second question that I think you're going to have to grapple with and really be presented with numerous questions from the public is, why would we ever propose a new school when you've just told us we're in fair condition to good condition, and the finishes maybe could use updating, but generally, we're in pretty good shape. So I think those are the two big issues that I'm going to be focusing on when you get into stage 3.
Great. Would you like a response to some of those now?
Up to you.
Okay. Great questions. Regarding the target enrollment, that was a number that we were discussing amidst the administration team and the design team, and part of our charge has not been to address or how to arrive at that final enrollment or target enrollment, and we can talk about how to do that in more detail later on, whether it's different analytical processes and services that we can bring into the picture. We haven't done that at this point. We just kind of started with a number and went with that. One of the topics that we did discuss at the facilities committee is if it happens to be lower or higher, the level of analysis that we're addressing at this point, we can add a multiplier to if we want to target 1,400 students or even a little bit more. When we get into task 4, which is cost analysis and phasing, we can apply a multiplier to help either reduce or increase that based on whatever we arrive at as a target enrollment. So we'll be able to address that in relatively short order if we do want to exercise more fully the enrollment analysis. Regarding the status question, there's while the physical condition of the building in terms of its structure and materials and envelope, that's probably more of a testament to, one, its existing construction and structural design. Also Jerry and his team for maintaining the existing system. I guess probably at this point in the analysis, I see the largest shortcoming of the existing facility in terms of its overall organization of the spaces, and the way that was added on to has led to some inefficiencies in terms of length of corridors and organization of the spaces, and some of the inefficiencies of supervision, passive supervision, using teachers and staff to be able to walk out into a corridor and analyze or just supervise what's going on. There's a lot of nooks and crannies that have resulted from the many additions over the past 5 decades or so. So I guess in short, I see the majority of the shortcomings, not necessarily in terms of its structural integrity and the physicality, but the organization of the spaces in order to suit maybe some of the targeted philosophical demands that the team has been discussing. Collaborative spaces, large enough spaces and zones for that collaborative effort between students, faculty, staff, and then also maybe another shortcoming is the congested hallways. We've heard a lot about that in terms of just how narrow they are to allow for simple circulation and wayfinding throughout the school, and then also a potential need for using those corridors for collaborative spaces. So while the physical condition of what we see is seemingly adequate and could last for another several decades, it's how those spaces are organized and connected with circulation and its accessibility is I see probably the biggest inefficiency and shortcoming.
You had talked about at the committee meeting the problem in architect talk. You're talking about the way things are laid out, and what my daughter would say is, yeah, it takes me forever to get from that class to that class, and I don't have time to stop at my locker to dump anything, right?
Right, good, yeah,
Okay.
it's a good summary, yep.
Yeah, and that's a concern.
Yeah.
And then the tight corridors, only make that, worse.
Mm-hmm.
But Bill, I'd have to agree with you on the point about that target enrollment number. Hypothetically, going with your thought, if we were to build new, it wouldn't make any sense to me, because if we're going to build a new building, it's going to last 50 years. Why would we build a building that only houses the students we have now? I mean, that makes actually no sense to me. I can't imagine that over the next 50 years, Ames isn't going to grow. So I've been thinking about that too, Bill, since that meeting, thinking, well, geez, 1,600 seems reasonable, because, Mike, I know your concern was, well, if we build something that's too big, we got to heat it, we got to cool it, we got to, take care of it, if it's too big of a space. But I'd surely not want to build something that only meets our needs today without looking to the future, when it's not a building we're going to say, oh, okay, we're going to build another high school somewhere else or add on to it again. Or, I think we want to kind of put a little more thought into that.
I'll hit that comment quick too.
Yeah.
When I first got on the board and we were looking at elementary buildings, one of the things that I sat down and did was I looked at buildings that the district has used in the past for educational purposes. And the common theme that I found amongst everything they had done up to the point that we looked at our elementary buildings was they never looked past the need of today. And by the time the buildings were opened a couple years down the road, the buildings were too small. They were short spaces. They didn't have what they needed. When we did the elementary project, we purposely built those buildings with the ability to flex with our community. The high school is a different dynamic because there's just one building. There's no flex with regards to one area of town to another. But I do think we need to have the foresight looking to the future and say, as best we can as a board, what does that look like? How big do we think we could be realistically? But we also need to be cautious because our district is extremely landlocked. We are one of the smallest school districts in Iowa. Our district boundaries, for the most part, are already developed with the exception of a couple of areas. And any growth that we see is either going to come through people open enrolling or through mergers or dissolution of other districts.
You raise a great question. Jerry, did you want to weigh in?
I would just chime in to say that this discussion will be an important one to have at some point. The reason I brought it up at facilities is this is a comparative study. So it's 6 of one, half dozen the other. We're creating a comparative scenario, not an absolute final one. The reason I brought it up is if 1,600 blows up our current high school, because we have to take every quarter wall down and we have to do everything. Well, that's not a reasonable comparison. I don't think, because we should just scrape it, stop the study, and start new. So I think we need to be prepared for some comparative accommodation for that to see what that looks like in the decision-making process. Now, with that said, and I said this at the facilities committee meeting, we're on a fixed income. And our fixed income is whatever the legislature chooses to provide us. So if we build 50,000 more square feet of high school than we need to support our current educational program, and if it's $2 to $4 a square foot out of operating budgets between custodians and utilities for that, it's $100,000, a couple $100,000 that we'll invest there. And that's I'm simply sort of making that point that it's not either or all or nothing. There's mindful ways to be able to expand spaces to do that. But I think that will be one of the more important discussions we have and understanding, just not unlike the pool. Shoot, we could build about whatever we wanted. We just operating it as a challenge. I was thinking about the high school is probably going to be the same square footage we have in all 5 elementary schools combined. Jerry, they're all about 75,000 square feet, plus or minus, right?
Yep.
So
I did a little bit of thinking on this too, and I thought that we shouldn't build our high school any bigger than what the elementaries can
support once they're built out. So I looked at the current sections of the elementary buildings. We have total of 15 sections now. If we average 22 students per section, that gives us 1,320 students projected for the high school, which is about where we're at right now. If we build out the 4 elementary buildings to full capacity, we'd have 18 sections. That'll get us to about 1,600 students at the high school at 22 students on average per class. If we look at it, taking it one more step just a little bit further, if we have currently get students up to 25 students per class on an average, that gives us calculates to 1,500 student high school. And if we build out 15 sections at the 25 students per section, that gets us to 1,800. So I kind of looked at those numbers to help to kind of have some basis to be able to ask the architectural firm to start at this point at 1,600. So I think also, like, you know, what you mentioned up here is to be able to build the base programs, gymnasium, cafeteria, auditorium, that's going to meet our projected capacity, and then add on immediately. We'll meet the current needs or slightly above the current needs as far as classroom space, and then we allow that for future expansion to be able to fit that out as the need arises. So I just thought I'd share that. So the 1,600 wasn't just pulled out of the air. I got a spreadsheet.
Oh, it's, yeah, that doesn't even account for open enrollment. And so it's just simply recognition that we'll make half a dozen decisions that will really shape the future of this, and that's probably the one at the top of the list.
So I guess at that 1,600 then, I was kind of felt confident with that. We know it's closer to 1,600 than 2,000. I mean, 2,000 would be just unrealistic and unreasonable. But that's why I think the 1,600 is about the right capacity to look at.
We'll get more data. It's going to be somewhere between 14 and 16, obviously. So I think Director Estes, that brings up a good point. Director Talbot does too. One of the other things that we need to look at is consolidation, the possibility of increased enrollment. But we do have one state legislator who wants countywide schools. In other words, there would be 99 schools in Iowa. So we don't know what the future is going to hold on that. Just saying.
I would like to point out something too. I know part of the discussion with regards to this building is, do we remodel, renovate, or do we rebuild? And trying to keep an open mind on that. I didn't hear anything tonight that made me jump up and down and say that the renovate, remodel is the way to go. I heard that our cosmetics of our structure look great. They've been well maintained. But we have some efficiency issues with heating and cooling, and that's all substructure. To get to that, we have to rip up the cosmetics, which means we have to replace the cosmetics. That's an additional cost. Just because they're great doesn't mean that they're going to be reused. The other thing is the flow. Looking at, gosh, it's page 6 on part 2, we see so many different security in and out points on this building. We're responsible and accountable for the well-being and safety of every person in that structure. When your structure is as porous as ours is, how do you do that? It's a nightmare. And that needs to be something that we think about too with regards to the safety and well-being of people in our building. So I didn't hear anything that said new construction is the best way. But I certainly wasn't convinced that saving what we have now is the option and go with either. 15 structures is a nightmare. When you talk about trying to tie systems together, tie materials together, different construction points, part of the building might be really, really good for 50 years. Part of the building might be good for 10. It's just kind of a nightmare.
Yeah, I won't argue with you on that. I would just say it's halftime. Sam wanted to bring a report to the board to say, hey, here's what we found so far, but it's halftime. They haven't I think our evaluative process will come in the final solutions, like, well, this is what this looks like versus that, versus the other, and the comparability of them. So, I mean, by all means, ask away, but I told Sam 10 to 15 minutes because it's halftime, you know, just to not keep everybody in the dark, but nobody's proposing anything yet. It's just it's a presentation of findings so far.
Yeah, we're through task 1.5 of 5. So, yeah, basically revelation of facts and findings. And task 3, which we were starting on actually this week and last week, the development of the options. Part of that will be the comparative process. And our final deliverable will also have a pros and cons matrix to where we'll be able to analyze the pros and cons of either building on and renovating or building new. Also woven into those pros and cons will be cost analyses and phasing analyses for construction. So through the rest of the tasks that will offer, I think we're going to be able to cover a lot of those questions and analytical procedures as we continue to move on.
I guess my question then becomes, because it is halftime, and we aren't asking for numbers or anything yet, that's a little unrealistic, but given the desired goal for where we think we're going to be and what type of learning environment we have stated we want to have, just a bird's eye, how conducive is the current structure for that? Is it something that's feasible? Is it something that's a bit of a reach? If it was impossible, I think you probably would have already said so.
Right. We think that both options are valid, you know, whether adding on or building brand new or renovating. So part of the exercise I shared earlier of had this diagram here, we began to see how it could potentially be laid out over the existing floor plan with this image, and then well as allocating some area in a fashion kind of superimposed over the existing floor plan as well. So we do think it's possible. Will it take knocking down some parts and pieces and renovating others? Yes, it will. Part of the analysis will be, okay, when does that toggle over to an inefficient way to meet the current and future demands of education, and where it says, okay, we should probably just build new. Don't know where that toggle point is yet, but at this point we think there is a valid scheme in there somewhere to where the existing facility can offer the basis for a successful option. You're right. If we were not convinced of it, then we'd just close our books and just say, hey, build new, but we're not at that point yet.
Thanks, Sam, for the update.
Is this report available to the public on your website or on our website?
My understanding is it'll be available to the public via the school website, and
He's going to send it to you.
It is already?
No, he
Or
has
will
to
be?
send it to me.
Okay. I mean,
I've got it. I'll get it to Kathy, and it will be on there probably tomorrow.
I'd encourage the public to look at this. I mean, going through, I mean, some of the things that you didn't really dig into. You mentioned the 21st century learning, but you've got the depth of what you did with this part one of this or task one, I should say, I guess. I'm digging into each edition and stating how it fits into the 21st century learning and teaching. And I mean, I would encourage the public to look this over, because this is, for every one of the editions to have that analysis is worthy for the public to know where we're at and where we're heading.
Mm-hmm. So. Great, thank you.
Great, thanks, Sam.
All right, thank you.
We'll go to next discussion item, School Finance 101.
This was a request from the directors to come forward with a little bit on school finance, how it operates. Chris and I are going to join hands here and try not to drag anybody into the weeds and try not to make their eyes roll back in their head. School finance is obviously one of the most complicated items that I think anybody's ever put together. The Uniform Foundation formula for education in Iowa has been around for a while, but it was their effort in the long run to guarantee that property-rich districts such as Ames cannot spend more money per pupil than property-poor districts, which I will not mention. But that's the whole idea behind what we call the Uniform Foundation Formula. And without getting into that formula, I think a couple things I wanted to do. First off, and I'm not certain if my little clicker works from here. I guess it doesn't. Chris, if you'd kick that one around. I think I always like to do this when I go out and speak with kids or when I go out and speak in public about the Ames schools, because it takes people by surprise. And I would start with student enrollment, and I would tell you that the student enrollment that I'm going to give you right here is 4687. That's almost, we're starting to push in on that 5,000 range, but the reason it's 4687 is this is noses. It is not a certified count. And when I talk about noses included in this are because we have a homeschool assistance program. It includes homeschool students. It includes those that are what I would call part-time. They will take 1 or 2 classes. And it extends all the way from elementary to high school. But that enrollment then can be broken down, and you can see this is the most recent of our student ethnicity, which I think our district should be pretty proud of. Almost 10% Asian, 8% Hispanic, 8.5% Black. White are just about 68%. We do have some Native Americans, and the new federal identification is mixed races. So we have a very diverse student population for Iowa, not necessarily for the United States, but for Iowa, this is obviously one of the top 13 most diverse school districts in the state. So what does it take to take care of 4,687 students? About 630 staff members. Now this includes, of course, Jerry's favorite, which it gets into custodial maintenance employees. It gets into our educational assistants, which is the second highest number of staff members that we happen to have, but it also includes, of course, teachers, nurses, the whole gamut for our 1 preschool, the 5 elementary schools, 1 middle school, and 1 high school. So the next question before Chris flips it would be, what do you think the overall budget is for the Ames Community School District? $80 million. A lot of people don't realize it's that large. They see their little building, they see where their child goes to school, they see the high school, but when you put it all together and include all of our equipment, everything that we've got going, it takes us, as Chris's number comes up, 100% accurate almost every time, $80,386,940. So the question is, where does that money come from? This is as simple a silo diagram as I can provide the public. And when I say simple, it's much more complicated than this, but let me try to help you out. The things that are across the top, including state aid, which is primarily set by the state legislature, and state aid is determined by a per pupil dollar figure. Just to keep things simple, you can round it up just about $6,500, but Chris would tell you the actual number is just slightly higher than that. But $6,500 per student is allocated to state aid, and that goes into the general fund. Again, this is part of that uniform foundation formula. You'll notice ISL, that really stands for Instructional Support Levy, which gives us a little bit of an opportunity in all districts to add a little bit more to the general fund money, and it does come, as you can see, from property taxes. We also have income surtax, we have sales tax revenue, and also federal funds that come to us, which I'll get to in just a second. But I think the interesting thing is, when we talk about silos, what that really means is these funds can only be used for very, very limited reasons. And I would also point out on the very far right, you'll see something called PEARL, P-E-R-L. We do not have that property tax. PEARL is for playground equipment, especially, and recreational levy is what it's called. We do not have a PEARL levy. Some school districts do. It's very small, but it does allow for such things as purchase of playground equipment, some athletic facilities. You can even buy supervision for your gymnasiums and things if your athletic facilities, if you open them during the weekends. SAVE is actually the 1 cent sales tax. This is the one that we started off with that extra penny many, many years ago. The state then put it into a larger coffer, and now spreads it out across the state based upon your enrollment. Incidentally, we bring in about $3.4 million worth of pennies every year. And you'll see at the bottom there's some little diagrams. It talks about the only things, and I'm sorry, it's a little bit small in the writing, but it's the only things you can use the statewide penny sales tax for. You can build buildings, you can buy equipment. We use a vast majority of that for our one-to-one technology efforts. And as it says at the bottom, any PEPAL or debt services or for allowable expenses can also be used that way. But it's very, very restrictive in how we can do that. What we have used our statewide penny with over the past 6 or 7 years is a portion of that to help buy down debt. We've been using most of it to add to our new elementary buildings to keep the GO bond down. And we're also saving money to do exactly the same thing, which was mentioned by Director Talbot. We have some unspent state penny money that we're kind of keeping in the bottom drawer to help buy down the total property or the total cost of a renovated or new high school, so that we can then maintain our property taxes at the current rate, which is one of the lowest, not only in Iowa, but across the state. I see we lost ourselves here.
Our battery's dead. I tried to wave at him, but he was...
Okay. There is a debt service, which is the bond issue money that was on there. We do have a voted PEPAL fund, which is a physical plant and equipment levy. And again, it's pretty much the same thing. Both the debt service, which can be used for buildings, and the voted PEPAL can only be used for buildings, equipment, and technology. And in our case, we use a lot of our PEPAL funds, interestingly enough, for a lot of various reasons that are now allowable by the state. Technology, for instance, our software. It's also used to buy 6 new sousaphones for the high school band. So it all works out to be the PEPAL, physical plant and equipment levy, is very, very important to this district. I'd like to point out one interesting thing about that PEPAL fund. And you'll see a little picture of a bus underneath PEPAL. You can use PEPAL funds to buy a new bus. You can't use PEPAL funds to buy a tire for your bus. We can use PEPAL funds to buy that new door. We can't use PEPAL funds to paint it. It's just strange. Hi, Counselor. I'm glad you're back there in the corner, so you can help dig me out. It's just an interesting fund, but we use it considerably. This is Jerry's prime for some of the PEPAL projects that were voted, or we had a hearing on just at the very beginning of our particular agenda, where we were expanding and looking at things like the new fascia and soffit on Sawyer School, the Ames Middle School auditorium lighting project. We'll be using PEPAL funds for updating the athletic fields at the middle school, and we'll be using athletic funds to increase the playground south of Edwards School so that those kids can actually have a full-size soccer field. So those are the kinds of things that we use PEPAL for, and the only things that we can use it for. The management fund, you'll notice a little line that goes straight up. It's paid for by your property taxes, but it can only be used to buy property and casualty liability insurances. So it insures our buildings. It keeps us going. We use it for workers' comp claims, as you can see, and we also use it to pay off early retirement. That brings us to the general fund, and this is what it really kind of looks like. Of the $80 million, there's $50 million there that come in the general fund, part of that uniform formula. My goal has always been to try and keep salary and benefits at 80%. You can see we're just slightly above that. I think our budget for next year will be right back down at 80, if not below, I hope. The interesting thing about this general fund is that it is actually determined in the long run by the state. It's like having a credit card and you do have a spending limit. You can't go above it. So as you take a look at this, we've got $50,091,000 roughly in our general fund. Again, 80% is wrapped up in people. The rest of it are fixed cost and consumable supplies, and you can see that we're using about $9 million a year to pay for utilities, for garbage collection, for transportation, for consumable supplies, for everything that we can imagine. And if inflation continues, or does as it does every year, around 2 to 3%, and we're only getting 1.11% new money from the state, you can see that the red and the yellow sections get larger as fixed costs, and the only thing that you can do to make that thing balance out is decrease the blue side, which we incidentally have been doing for a long, long period of time. But we still have been able to maintain the programs that make our kids special. And I think the programs that make this district special and attract, I think, offerings that we can give to our kids to keep them engaged in school as best we can. That's really the basis to that. And I'm going to turn it over to Chris to kind of finish this up, and then we can try and answer some questions.
The rest of the presentation is the same presentation I did last week, and it's kind of redundant to what Dr. Taylor just did, so I'm not going to go through all those slides. The only thing that I would add is, so that everybody is clear, that with very few exceptions, what you can do in one fund, you can't do in any other fund. Exception would be buses. You can do that out of PEPL or general fund. Technology, you can do them out of PEPL, SAVE, general fund. But for the most part, whatever's allowed in one fund is not allowed in the other. So in other words, we cannot build buildings out of our general fund, nor can we hire educational staff out of our sales tax funds. So I think that's really important. I think we'd open it up for questions. The rest of the slides just took his little diagram and put it more into words and told you specifically what we do in each fund, but I did that presentation last year, so.
One of the things that I might add is those are the silos, but we also have categorical funding that we receive, and there was some, you saw federal in there, and we also get some from the state. Two of our largest categorical funds are those that Ms. Darcy runs through special education, which is running about $2 million a year. That's categorical. It can only be used for special ed needs and special education of our students, and it's paid for through a property tax. The other one is one that Jonas operates through our at-risk programming, which is essentially an entitlement from the state of Iowa for us to increase property taxes for at-risk students and programming. We also have a very large one that the governor has signed into law, which is called the Teacher Leadership and Compensation Grant. About $1.2 million that can only be used for coaches, instructional coaches, TOSAs, or teachers on special assignment, model teachers, mentor teachers, and professional development of certified staff. You're all probably familiar with Title I, which is another categorical fund only for reading and math for those kids that are struggling. Title II is professional development strictly. Title VI is for assessment purposes. And last but not least, I'd mention the ELI, which is our early literacy initiative, which is money that we receive from the state that can only be used for fast testing. We wish that it would be for smarter balance, but we'll take fast at the current time. So we have categorical funds that we receive money from various sources that can only be used for very, very specific reasons. And again, as Chris mentioned, cannot be switched back and forth between silos or between categories. Very complicated in some way if we wanted to get into it deeper, but we don't.
So Chris, in general terms, how are we doing financially? With the solvency, with the bond rating, with the other things, how are we doing?
We ended up fiscal year 2016 in good financial shape. One of the concerns that we've had, and we talked about this a little bit in the Budget and Audit Committee, is our spending authority. We made progress on that in 2016, mainly because we went and got some back authority that we should have gotten. I think we've kind of steadied the ship on that. In my projections, I see us holding steady. We make cuts every year to stay within our new money. There's a few other things that little tricks I put in that will help us get that spending authority up. As far as fiscal year 2018, we went over it a little bit in the Budget and Audit Committee. It's really looking pretty good. And the main reason is, and I appreciate Eileen and the teachers coming tonight to talk about the collaborative process we had. We reached a phenomenal settlement with our teachers, and that is going to put us in very good shape for 2018. So I give them a lot of credit for making some sacrifices on their side that will help us not have to make cuts this year.
Other questions, comments?
A year ago, there certainly were people in the legislature talking about some changes in the state penny, that, some to our benefit and some to our detriment. And I haven't paid any attention, given all of the other changes they threw at us over the last few weeks. Has that been discussed at the state level? Am I missing anything?
I can give you an update on that. The bills that have been proposed have been to extend it for 20 years or to 2050. And both in the House and the Senate, but it hasn't been brought up for committee discussion yet. So we're hoping, we need people to please contact your legislators, let them know we want to continue that, but right now it hasn't been voted on yet.
I'd even go, I'm talking the other changes that would actually...
talk about spending, using some of it that... There was a proposal last year that was floated out that some of that money could be used for water quality issues, and that was dead in the water last year. And from what the leader of the Republican-controlled education chair, she said that's dead in the water. So I doubt very much that's going to poke its head again.
On us?
That's a different issue.
Because there was talk of that also.
Yeah, there are a number of bills that are, multiple ones, that are talking about flexibility in allowing us to use dollars from certain silos in certain areas. But again, there are a lot of different versions of that floating out there right now.
The one that would help us the most is if we could use 1 cent sales tax for transportation. I think a lot of schools are looking at that. That'd be a $2 million boon, so to speak, to our general fund. Go ahead, Chris.
And there's two proposals out there that I've been kind of keeping an eye out. One is the one that's associated with Davenport the most, that's made the issue about that there's a $175 difference between the highest district cost and the state cost per student. We're midway. Ames is $90 higher than the state cost per student. We're not at the 175 higher, but we're at the 90. That one seems to be gaining some traction. There's been bills introduced on that. There's also a transportation equalization bill out there and actually our transportation costs are fairly high, on the high side, to try to get some more money. And the governor had made a comment in the paper a day or two ago that the amount of money that had been allocated for schools would most likely double. And I think he was talking about that student cost piece and the transportation piece. So I think there might be an opportunity for some additional revenues. I did the math just on the student cost difference, and it was about $350,000 for us.
I don't know how successful, or if they still have legs, but those last two are the most important ones that I've heard recently, which gets into transportation and also cost per pupil.
And one thing I'll mention now, instead of under committee reports, since we're talking about it, there's kind of a concern that could impact the penny, because you asked about, Tim, the penny. There's a Senate file 294, and I want to be specific about this, that was proposed to mandate that all school districts provide video and audio in all student areas, and that it must be paid for out of saved funds. So in other words, all areas in the school, of course, with the exception of restrooms and locker rooms, must have video and audio devices. Now, needless to say, I have some privacy issues there, but this has been proposed by a state senator, and I don't remember his name, but our state senator, Cornbach, sent it to me and said, this is kind of crazy stuff. So that's one that we need to keep an eye on, because the impact that that would have on us is that would mean we'd have to spend all that money on that video and audio equipment. I'm sure Carl would be real excited about that. And then, but not only spend the money, we'd have to maintain it. And there's the data, you have to like keep it for X number of months, and it's just crazy. Carl, do you know about this?
Oh, yeah.
He does.
Oh, okay. Good.
It was proposed by Shilgren, I believe, is how it's pronounced. But the biggest key factors in this particular one is, yes, it's required. It says we're welcome to use saved dollars, therefore making it not an unfunded mandate. But the biggest key to this whole thing is that it's required to be kept for 6 months.
Yeah.
So while we do have cameras in a number of locations at the middle school and the high school and things of that nature, most do not have audio capabilities, and none of that is saved for 6 months. It also, there's a clause in there as well that says all that video is public record and can be requested at any point in time by anybody within the community, and we would have to respond just like we would relative to any document requested any other place.
Yeah,
So
that's what freaked me out when I read that. It was like, anybody in the community could request, an hour for what's going on in the lunchroom. I mean, it's a total invasion of our students' privacy in my mind. So I'm hoping it doesn't get any legs. At least Senator Kornbach was hoping the same thing when he sent it to me. But the fiscal impact that I think is greatest for us would be that that they're not calling it unfunded, but of course they're saying, well, you can use saved dollars for it, the penny sales tax, so that way they get away from saying it's an unfunded mandate, but it is. I mean, it's an unfunded mandate. We would have to use money that we currently use to build our schools and use our technology and upgrade that, and that would take away from our kids.
Any other discussions? Great, thank you. Moving on to 2017-18 district fees. Dr. Taylor.
I think you can see from the document on D4 that we're proposing our fee list for 17-18. One of the things that I think you'll notice is that some of the costs have gone down, some have gone up. It is pretty much the same. We've eliminated some areas for student fees, especially in AP Biology and AP Physics. But for the most part, the list is very similar to what it was last year. One of the discrepancies I think that directors may want to know about is, as you look on page 3 under the periodicals, that some of our elementary periodicals, some buildings are paying more than others. Supply and demand. The more that a building orders, the less the cost. So our larger building is kind of getting a little bit more of a kickback on that one. But this is for discussion, and if you got any questions, I can certainly try to answer those or take it back.
Comments, questions? All right, thank you. Moving on to the next item. Board committee reports, updates.
I think most of what we had from the facilities committee this last time was presented by Sam tonight, so that one was helped us out a little bit. I wanted to let our facilities committee members know that Ron Peeler is available. One of Danielle's colleagues down at Allers Law will be available on March 8 in our facilities committee meeting to talk about TEFRA and relationships with other 501(c)(3)s in an enterprise system. There's lots of questions that need to be answered there, and he's the man to do it for us.
As I mentioned earlier, Teaching and Learning Committee met last Friday. The overview of the professional development, which was discussed at length earlier, and lots of people from the public commenting. I would say that the overview, my take on the overview is that it met a lot of the criteria of what the people that came here tonight were asking for, which is nice, because that makes this, as Director Franzen has said better than me, that a community effort, and I think that, I hope we can make some big strides in the right direction there. We did spend a little bit of time on this definition of success, and is, certainly one of the things that I think other board members have wanted the Teaching and Learning Committee to focus on, and we're making a few suggestions there, and I would say the good news is we had 100% approval by the parents that were at the committee meeting. It was one parent, but it was 100% approval by the parent that was at the committee meeting. So, anything to add?
No. One thing we talked about was Mary and Aaron were there to give us an update on the gathering community and parent input on the pilot materials. And at the next board meeting on March 27th, there will be official communication that will go out, but I wanted to let the board know, I believe 6, right, before the board meeting. There's going to be various times that the materials will be available, but they are making one of the times prior to one of our board meetings. But that will all be posted, all the specific information will be posted on the Word Study blog.
I marked it down as from 5 to 6:30.
You're right.
On March 27th,
Yes,
the night
yes,
of
yes.
that next board meeting.
Yeah.
Which, of course, the one person was talking, and that meeting at Sawyer is that same exact time, I think, is what they mentioned. And I started to put that on my calendar already, and then realized that I will be here.
Yeah. But there will be hopefully, if they're able to get the capabilities to do this, the video running to provide some background and some context for community members and family members when they're going to conferences next week. So every elementary school will have this station during parent conferences, so they'll be able to see some of the materials that our students have been working with, and then some information on it. So, and it'll also all be on the webpage as well.
And then the parents, while they are there, review that and review the materials also as taxpayers, but anyone that wants to at that time could fill out their review there. There will also be cards available with the website that parents and community members will be able to go to at a later date if they would rather fill out their review at home later in the evening. So,
Any other updates? All right, moving on. Policies to discuss. Chairman Rodney.
Well, I guess I was the missing link at the last meeting. I did get to view it from the comfort of my lazy boy. And the first topic here is the one about public participation at board meetings. I know it was strongly advised that you wanted my input on it. So I guess I'll open it up with who has questions about what it says and what do you want to know? I'd be happy to answer my thoughts on it specifically.
I guess I'd ask, since our policy, when that rewrite of BDDH happened, it was regrettably a policy committee that you weren't able to attend. I could certainly guess at your stance on it, but I wasn't willing to put your words into whether you liked whether you were supportive of the rewrite, but I guess it's kind of to a certain extent, my rewrite on allowing people to come to the table on discussion items, item by item, and give us a review during the discussion items. And so if you could weigh in on that, on what you think, because there certainly has been a discussion on whether we should do that. I think overwhelmingly, I wouldn't even say I think overwhelmingly, I would say 100% of the feedback that I've gotten from the public is almost demanding that. I would say it's one of the things I've heard the most about from people over the last, other than the pilot program.
Okay. Well, my thought process on that is, honestly, I like public forum, but I also like the fact that when we're discussing As of right now, we're discussing amongst ourselves and amongst the presenters. But the piece that we're lacking from that is the views of our community that we're also representing, their interest when we're here. I am not opposed to allowing an opportunity for public comment on discussion items. Now, when it comes to action items, I think we've passed the point of discussion into the point where we've taken our considerations and it's time to make a decision. So I'm not really supportive of extending it beyond the discussion topic portion of our agenda. But I do support the idea of having public input after discussion items for us to at least take that consideration. I think it is important that it is a listen point for us, not a back and forth communication piece. We're getting that information so that we can discuss amongst ourselves, not necessarily to have a dialogue at that moment in time. And I think if we do it in a regard where we encourage a dialogue, I think we're setting ourselves up for meetings that last until 5 a.m. And it's not beneficial. So let's get the input so that we can have the valid discussions. That part I'm not objective to. Other things in here, to be honest, one thing that I see missing from this, and maybe I wouldn't have even noticed it if it hadn't been for the dialogue that occurred during the public forum at that meeting that I missed. I find it very offensive when we have a public forum to have dialogue from our community to speak to us, stand in front of this table with nothing but disregard for our position, having a dialogue with people in the community. They can do that outside of this building. If they want to come and take an opportunity to speak to us that we've provided for them, be respectful, because we're trying to be respectful to you by giving you that opportunity. I also think, in retrospect, looking at that it gets frustrating for me when we have in policy and standing practice a 3-minute limit. And I counted the clock, and multiple speakers were speaking for 9 minutes or more. It's not respectful of what is stated up front. The other piece of it is we say in here, the person will recognize themselves and come forward. It's done in a singular fashion, yet we continue to allow multiple people to come forward to our table. And then they want more time because there's more people. I understand where they're coming from, but I think it needs to be an individual act, and I think we need to be holding that act to more accountability.
And Ronnie, I really, really appreciate your comments. This whole conversation, I'd say for the last 4 or 5 months, I've tried to allow latitude to people to vent. I completely agree that a lot of times we get blasted in ways that are very presumptuous. It really bothers me when people think that I'm doing things that are not in the kids' best interest, because I have no other motivation but to help the kids. And so I know emotion, we're dealing with people's children, and it's so vitally important we make right decisions by them. But it needs to be done in a respectful way, because if dialogue occurs and all of a sudden conflict boils up, people's emotions take over, and you say things and you react to certain things that are hard to take back, and it doesn't allow for an active communication to come to a solution. I want to be pragmatic. I want our community to find a way to find solutions to these issues. But when you come at it from an approach that is disrespectful, like you talked about, or very judgmental, we need to be held accountable. But you can do that in ways that are a lot more respectful. So I agree that I have allowed people to just come up and sign up partway through. I think I'm going to stop that. I don't like it. We used to have a timer going, and I stopped doing that. So if the board is supportive of taking more of a stance to follow this policy, I'll enforce it. I talked also with city leadership and how they deal with public displays of support for other people presenting. talking with Mayor Campbell, she doesn't allow it. And so it's just this fine line of how do you value community feedback and allow us to receive information. I've always taken the approach that it's better to talk one-on-one with us or in committee meetings or however you can communicate with us best to find solutions. So I guess I'm looking for guidance on do we want to change things and how this is operating. I don't want these meetings to drag on because this is a meeting of our board in this space to come to a conclusion. And dialogue isn't, in my opinion, not helpful with the public.
And I appreciate hearing that from you, Luke. I wasn't trying to point a finger and say that you and somehow weren't doing what you should be doing as the person sitting in that chair. But for me, it's about respect. I don't mind if you come up and you talk and it gets to be 3.5, 4 minutes. That's within reason because you're concluding your thought, you're concluding your statement. And in respect for that person, I'm fine with that. But when your statement goes 3 times as long as the time that you're allowed, you might want to rethink how you're phrasing your thoughts because you're taking advantage of the respect that we've given. And it's hard to put it into practice without following it in a black and white format because it becomes a disparity issue. And we've heard already tonight about disparity. We don't want to create a system where we're giving someone more than we're giving someone else. So the only way you do that is by creating that black and white scenario. And it's not because we don't see the gray in the situation or circumstance, but we have a meeting to run. And it's a process, and we need to be fair to everybody. And the only way we can truly ensure that fairness is by having a strict guidance that we follow.
Director Deardorff, I mean, the way you've managed these meetings, I think, has been great, and I wouldn't change anything that you've done with the forum. Some of them have been difficult, and I think that's great. My question would be, we had somebody come up tonight and speak that didn't sign up. It's in policy. If we're going to have policy, I want policy followed, but if we're going to change the policy, then let's change it. Because I agree with the way that you have been managing this. We can put it in policy that at the discretion of the president that he can allow other people to come up and speak during that forum, if that's what we're going to do. But I want policy to match what we do. But I wouldn't change anything that you've done. I mean, I think you've handled it perfectly. So
let me just jump in here real quick. Respectful communication between us and whoever's coming to the mic is definitely important. And there's no way that I would disagree with that. But one thing that we can do in that instance, let's say somebody doesn't get here in time to get their name on the list, because that's what usually happens. What we as a board, under parliamentary procedure, we can easily say, okay, John Smith didn't make it in time, can we add him to the end of the list? And if that's agreed upon by the majority of the board, then we add his name to the list. If that's not agreeable to the board, then we don't add him to the list. So we can handle that. We don't have to create some language in the policy regarding that or be really, strict-armed about, enforcing the policy. I think we can handle that. Luke, I think you've done a great job doing it. So I don't think you need to change anything about that. Getting back to the issue at hand, I just want to have a couple questions about what's being proposed. First of all, I think we should, and I think the community has been asking us to be able to have more of a dialogue on specific issues that we're voting on. It's a question of where. And right now, the current policy does allow for, and I'll read it again, the board may discuss an item and ask questions for clarification. And that's under the public forum section. Now, practice has been, of late, and since I got on the board, that we didn't do that. But when I realized it, I asked a few questions tonight just to clarify some things. I think on one we did get into a little discussion, but that's under our current policies. Now, in my mind, if something's on the agenda for an action item, that makes sense for that to be the point in which we can have that dialogue with somebody who comes to speak on that particular item that we're voting on that night. We can ask, they can make their statement, we can ask clarification questions, we can discuss amongst ourselves within the public forum section. That makes sense to me. So if that's where we want to do it, that's great, then let's leave it there. Or, like Tim has suggested, if I'm not mistaken, you've suggested that we take that out of the forum section and allow people to talk about an item as it comes up on our agenda, correct?
Only on discussion items,
Okay.
not on action items.
Yeah, I'll clarify, Louis. This rewrite has specific language in it with regards to public forum.
So the last one is
It adds specific language with regards to public input with discussionary items. And nowhere in the policy does it state where any of these particular items would fall within the agenda.
Right, okay, that's what I wanted to clarify. So, I think what my feeling would be is that we really just leave it the way it is and allow for that dialogue, and go back to that practice of allowing the board to discuss an item with someone who's coming to the board with a concern, a question, a request, and allow for the discussion of that item and asking any clarification questions of that individual. During that discussion, then we, assuming that be a item that's on the agenda, okay? I'm just making that situation. Then we can talk about it. Now, of course, if it's an item that's not on the agenda and somebody's just coming to express, a general concern about something, no, we don't need to spend time talking about it and wasting time and not moving forward with the meeting. That would be silly. But if it's a specific item that's on the agenda and there's a group of people coming to talk, then I think that's a good opportunity for us to allow for that public input at that time.
Now, I'm looking at this, Louis, and it says the board may, in the strike-through, is discuss an item.
Right,
And is not struck through, but I believe it was intended it should have
Yeah.
been.
So what I would say is that if, we're just discussing this tonight, this isn't an action item. What I would suggest is that we get rid of that strike-through, leave, discuss an item, and ask questions, or it actually should be changed, or ask questions for clarification. And not even include discussion items, Tim, that whole section, because in the public forum, both discussion items and action items can be covered.
My problem with that, and I think tonight was the perfect example of why this rewrite is correct, but to add the discussion items. What we just saw tonight, where the group from Sawyer came up and walked through some of what they are doing, and then we had a lot of people in the public that came up and added to that conversation. And that's exactly what I would like to see in the discussion item portion of our meetings. We have a lot of experts in this town. We just saw 5 or 6 or 7 that came to talk about that specific topic, and it extended the conversation to me. And that's, I was taking notes on the things that they said. I made a couple notes of people that I want to contact that came up and spoke, that I want to ask them some questions behind the scenes. It extended my learning on the topic, and I think that's a good thing. And so I think this meeting was the exact reason that adding the discussion items to allow people from the public to come up and speak is the correct thing to do. And I'm even more in support of it, given what we just saw. I think the people that came up tonight, if you think back of the meetings where people get up and speak before our meetings, before we actually discuss anything, and we hear a lot more angst, and then 20 minutes later we get a staff presentation that talks about specifically what the people were requesting. And I think we can present this district in a better light by doing it this way. I think that we can have a more functional dialogue with the community by doing it this way.
I agree with you, and then what we need to do is add to that, if we keep that section?
Yeah.
Okay, then we just need to add to it that one sentence from the previous paragraph that says the board may discuss and ask questions, because right now, all it says is that they can come forward and make comments.
I don't support the notion that we're having a dialogue, though.
So,
The Iowa School Board Association specifically recommends not doing that. There's cases of other districts going to that and then immediately going away. I think it's appropriate for us to ask questions, clarifying questions, but all it'll become is this round table of an endless circle that will never get anything accomplished. So I'm not trying to suppress dialogue, but it can't be a back and forth as we're discussing as a board.
Here's my take.
This may surprise everybody, but I have an opinion on this subject. Okay, first of all, Luke, I don't know how you do it. You're absolutely a phenomenal leader. You've handled the chaos and controversy wonderfully. I would have quit if I was you. So anyway, my further opinion, this is a terrible forum for dialogue. I mean, just start with this wall. You know, how in the heck am I going to have a real dialogue with somebody when I'm sitting behind 2 computer screens and a wall? It's a terrible forum. So I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking, how in the world can we do something better than we're doing? And I'm thinking, what is it that people come to us with in public forum? Okay, bump and run stuff. I don't like the way the school bus operates. You miss my kid at 10:30. Okay, that's fine. We don't have to have a dialogue at that. See? We get done with that. We talk to Chris. Chris talks to the scheduler. Everything's settled. We don't need a dialogue. That's your bump and run stuff. Second thing that people come to us with in open forum, they want us to talk about personnel and we can't do it. Over and over and over again, we're requested and threatened and called names because we don't talk about personnel. Can't do it. So there's no reason to have any dialogue about personnel. Then we get into serious issues. Okay, we've got a serious issue. We've been discussing this issue for 8 years that I've been on the board. And that is, what is the source of the separation of scores between minority students and white students? And then we have to realize that that's not the correct question because there are minority students that are doing better than white students, okay? So what we've got to do is recognize this as a true issue, a true discussion, something that needs to be vetted thoroughly. So what's wrong with having community members that want to vet those issues thoroughly ask to be on the discussion agenda?
So you're saying that they would actually put in a formal request?
They actually petitioned to be on the discussion agenda.
Actually, that's already in our policies. If regarding our board putting something on the board agenda, that's in here. Anybody can ask, not a board member, anybody in the public can ask the board president to do that, and the board president can go ahead and do that. If the board president and superintendent say no, then that individual can then appeal to the rest of the board, and with 3 of us saying yes, and you're suggesting 2, which I think is a good idea, it can be added to the agenda. So that's already there.
And we would have the same criteria as we have for school personnel. They give us the written summary before the discussion so we can actually prepare and have an intelligent discussion instead of off-the-cuff commentary.
Yeah, it wouldn't work if they just got to sit down and start talking and we had no idea what the topic was.
We need a summary. No different than the school personnel give us. I mean, that's a thought to work with, but having a dialogue in this situation, we proved tonight that doesn't work when there were questions asked during public commentary. what's going to happen with the questions during public commentary, they're going to turn into two things. They're going to turn into promotion of a view, and it's going to turn into dialogue, and both of them are inappropriate.
I'm going to come back to this too, because I do not support the language of discuss. I like the idea of getting clarification. If there's something that's said and I don't understand the context, I have no problem with asking that person to give a further understanding of what it is they said, so that I know what their intent is or where the information came from. But to ask for open dialogue, that's not the intent. The public forum's intent is to give the community an opportunity to present to us information, an idea, a concern that we may not be aware of, so that we are now aware of it, and then we can take proper action on that. It's not to have dialogue about it. The point where we need to have dialogue is either before that point or after that point, but not at that moment in time. And to comment on what Bill said about this setup for dialogue, this setup makes us look like superiors when the reality of it is we're elected officials, we are servants. If we're going to have dialogue, I want it to be sitting across the table, drinking a cup of coffee, or in some fashion that makes me an equal to that individual, not something that puts me in a position where I appear to be in authority of that situation. Because the reality of it is I'm not an authority on anything. I'm one of 7. And I'm one of 7 representing 50,000 people. I'm a servant.
The only thing I'd point out is the discuss an item part, if, whether the strike-through is on there or whether you leave those 3 words in that paragraph. I don't really have an opinion on that part. It has been in there, the discuss an item, and in practice, we rarely, if ever, do that. And so whether it's still in there, it's the 7 people sitting at this table that have the decision to make as to whether they're going to discuss the item or not. And so that part, if that's a make or break on whether this rewrite gets passed, I defer to everybody else on that one. But
if I can give you my interpretation of that, the board may discuss an item and ask questions. That generally was intended to mean that after someone speaks at public forum, the discussion is amongst the people at this table. It's not dialogue out that way, and I would warn the board about starting dialogue in any board meeting. This is a public board meeting, or a board meeting in public, not a public board meeting, but I would warn you against that. It's the discussion here which usually ends up with something similar to, Tim, would you do this? Would you direct your staff to research that? Would you bring us back more information about what was discussed? So I wanted to, when that was scratched out about discuss an item, the intent there was discussion amongst the board members at this table.
And one thing that I think the reasons we've been fairly effective as a board is through our committee structure. And I guess I'd be supportive, Bill, of that notion of bringing a group of people or one person back if it's already gone through the committee process. So in the event someone, let's just use dyslexia. So the parents are up in arms about dyslexia. They've met extensively with TLC, but they're still not quite getting what they want. I think they could appeal to the larger board to make it a bigger discussion, because we can't act, committees can't act alone. It requires action of the board, and the expectation is that information is brought up to the board from the committee. I envision this endless board meeting where I could just ask to have a discussion on anything, and it's just going to roll and roll and roll. So I'm an advocate of the committee structure because it works, but I'm not in favor of a direct dialogue at will.
And I'd like to add something to that we have tried the past couple of TLC meetings to, in terms of the framework of our meetings, that as we have agenda items, then we are providing the public community members the opportunity to ask questions, but then we have had dialogue in those committee meetings that I have found, I won't speak for you, Director Rasmussen, you weren't at the meeting 2 meetings ago, but I found very helpful and effective to have that at the committee level. To utilize. In some cases, there were people who were had some personal experiences or some expertise that they were able to provide us in that framework, and I much prefer it there. And I would be supportive of your idea of then, if we do view
that this would be then warrant of then the board agenda then to bring forward to the full board.
The thing I'd add, I mean, from that standpoint, though, is that paragraph on letting the public come up to talk about discussion items, which I do think is the most important part of this whole rewrite. When you talk about people coming to the committees, I would tell you again, it's 100% of the people that have come to me about this policy have wanted this paragraph. It's been probably the second most talked about item that I've heard from people of this community, that they want this paragraph added in there. I have not had a single person come to me and say, well, that's, you shouldn't do that. Certainly the literacy plan has been the thing that I've heard the most about, but for this one thing that they think that if we're going to want to engage the community, that this is the most important item, and it's been a lot of people. I really think we should keep that paragraph in there.
But would it really?
I struggle though with this, in that if we're going to leave it in both places, that means, I'm just kind of trying to imagine a meeting, and that means you're going to have a public forum, and with a long list of people, and then you're going to go on to discussion items, and you're going to have a presentation, and then you're going to have individuals come up to talk about that, and then it's kind of a back and forth. I mean, is that what you're envisioning?
If you think back on, you could go back and watch the public forum and then look at the agenda for most of the meetings. I would say the majority of all the people that have ever come up and spoken during public forum, it might not be an overwhelming majority, but the majority of the people that have come up to speak during public forum have come up to speak about something that is on the agenda. And so this would provide them that same forum. So we're probably not doubling the number of people that are going to come up and speak, because most of, you're tying it to the conversation. We're able to see the staff report on that topic, and then that person gets to come up and maybe give us some questions that we want to ask, or maybe just give us some clarifying statement that gives us a different vision of it.
I'm really comfortable with that. The only thing that I would ask, and I would agree that adding discussion into that section would not be appropriate, but I would like to see the language regarding asking questions for clarification to be added then, so that if and when that happens, we can at least ask a question to clarify something. Kind of like I did tonight, where I just clarified, a specific question for somebody, and it wasn't a discussion, and we didn't discuss it necessarily.
And then, Tim, I have one more comment for you and Rodney. If the committee can bring us something, we don't have to be unanimous. I think you mentioned this before also. I mean, generally we are, but if the committee can bring us a proposal that the committee agrees to, give it to us, let us vote.
Yeah. What I'm gathering from this is I think we're finding some unity in not having discussion other than discussion amongst the board in this public meeting that's a meeting in public. I think that's something we need to make sure we're clear on, that when we have the discussion commentary from our public, it doesn't mean that they get to have discussion with us. The discussion is the board's discussion. We are discussing based off the information we are receiving. And that's something that maybe we need to be more crystal with regards to how that policy is written. I have no objection whatsoever to having the statement with regards to asking a question for clarification being added to the discussion. But I think we need to also make sure that when we do that, we need to be very clear that we are not having discussion for dialogue.
Yeah, the one problem, Rodney, with the clarification question, you have not served with people that have a sole agenda, and I have. And they're going to pack the public forum with their supporters, and they're going to ask every one of them questions that support their sole agenda. It's going to turn into promotion not clarification. And that's inappropriate. And you've not had that horrible experience of serving with those kind of people, and I have.
And actually, Bill, on that point, you're right, because I've served on a city council where we had a situation like that. And that's where the chair, the president, steps in and says, that's not appropriate. And the board supports him or her and supports that decision that, continuing to act like that and abuse really the policy, it's appropriate for them to do that. So there's some safeguards there.
We may need a bailiff for that.
Pardon me?
So we may need a bailiff.
Oh, no, I think this is Ames, come on.
No, we saw it last meeting. Luke tried to get that guy's attention, and he was not having it.
Well.
And I'm not saying a bailiff for violent reasons, but one for reasons of decorum. So I'm listening patiently, trying to reconcile all of this, and for me, this is an engagement issue. And I do think these meetings are in the public, and I think we need to do our business up here, and this is for everybody to see. But I think Tim, my suspicion, based on your comments from a lot of folks you've been talking to, is that our folks want to engage with us. So how do we do that? How do we make that more available, more accessible, and more productive? And candidly, we're about 3.5 hours in, and we're still on discussion items. And I'm not sure who we're serving tonight in doing it this way. Maybe we're serving everybody, or maybe everybody's wore out and cried uncle. So I think there's that side of it to be mindful of as well.
Yeah, I think the policy probably needs to go back to the committee one more time, just to take one more once over it, make sure we have a consensus of understanding as to what it is we're trying to accomplish with it, and that the language within is very clear and concise. I think we're probably about a 95% solution right now, but we just need to get the rest of it taken care of. I know there were comments made with regards to the policy for staff complaints. I didn't have any other problem with any of the other policies in there, by the way. That we've looked at them before. They're pretty much just verbiage issues that Jerry is taking care of with regards to the policies under his care. But staff complaints is a new one, I believe. Is that correct? Or is it an existing policy that we just kind of went back through? Because I didn't remember seeing any major tweaks to it. Or am I looking at the wrong part?
I'm just getting down to it.
No, it's existing.
It was existing,
Yes.
okay. Yeah, I don't see any language in here that's changed. To be honest, I don't find this one to be very convoluted. I think it's pretty clear what the intent is and what the process is, and I don't think it's different than any other organization, private or government. If you have a problem with a superior and you don't feel comfortable talking to that person when it comes to filing a complaint, you go to the person above that person. There should be a position for appeal, which there is. If that person is the person in charge, then you go to the person that they report to, which this policy to me is quite clear that that is allowed. So I don't see any problems with this one. I did read through the comments that were made. I understand where they're coming from, but I think it's really an issue of looking at the policy instead of maybe the administrative rules. The policy is very clear. The rules might need a little bit of adjustment potentially, but that's not something that the board is ultimately in control of. We're in control of policy. We say what the expectation is. It's the administration's job to figure out how that expectation is accomplished.
The one thing I'd mention, I believe the conversation was that with the staff complaints one too, is that we're all, there's that possibility that we're adding an HR director, in which case this policy is probably coming back to policy committee next school year for a rewrite. And so we didn't really put a lot of effort into making a major revision of it when it's going to turn right around and get a major revision.
Yeah,
so,
and I would concur.
So
it seems very
we did
likely
leave it
that we're
alone.
going that route.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things we tried to do with that formal procedure, maybe more than a decade ago, was keep them consistent between every policy that we have, that it's, the intent is to get it resolved at the lowest level possible before you start taking it up the ladder one step at a time. It doesn't do any good to have an issue and start calling you guys. And that happens way too much, or it did happen way too much a long time ago. It doesn't happen anymore because we really have gotten more people conditioned to the fact that if you're having a problem, you need to visit with the person you're having a problem with and quit coming to mama or daddy to try and get it resolved. And so that formal procedure is pretty consistent through all of our policies, including harassment and discrimination and right on down the line.
Yeah. The only thing I think I would add, Tim, is from an administrative point of view, and you probably already do it to be honest, but every year the staff needs to be reminded of that process if they're not currently. And I find it hard to believe they're not. So it's more of an issue of were you listening or were you not? If you do have an issue, are you looking for those resources to give you guidance or are you not? I've been in a situation where I had to do that. I looked for my policies. I took my guidance. It led me the right direction.
All right, well, thanks for the discussion, and send it back to you guys to work. Moving on to consent, I'll take a motion.
Move approval of the consent items as presented.
Second.
Moved by Rasmussen, second by Franson. Discussion, Dr. Taylor.
Got minutes from the regular meeting of February 13 and the special meeting held February 16. Claims and payroll for January and financial reports for January 2017 from Chris. The personnel report, and you'll notice that there are 4 voluntary early retirement requests, including Mary Kautsky, who has been for a couple years #1 on the teacher seniority list, but she now has requested retirement after 41 years as a PE teacher at Ames High School. Sally Matters, secretary to the athletic director after 33 years. Kay Billings, who is foreign language teacher at Ames High School, Spanish mostly, 15 years. And the voluntary early retirement request of Mr. Stephen Lynn, who is the vocal music teacher at Ames High and has been there for 26 years. We also have gifts to the district, including a book of poetry, Snuggle Poems from Kirsty Minion to the Mitchell Media Center, chair pockets and weighted bag from Jerry Baumeister to fellows. It's Mrs. Franco's first grade, Mrs. Vertonen's third grade, and Miss Brecky's room. Some assorted tapes from 3M Manufacturing to the Edwards Makerspace. You'll notice that there are 2 contracts, the agreement with Windstream for the new facilities building. Carl just, he is still here, but that really is a transfer of internet and other services from the old building to the new, and a CIC contract for programming changes for the at-risk report, which will help Mr. Michael get his work done. We have continuous open enrollment applications, and Chris has submitted a receive and file of the audit report.
Any other discussion? Proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. Item 20.
I move the board approve the new open enrollment applications as presented.
Second.
Moved by Franson, seconded by Rasmussen. Discussion. Proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. Item 21.
I move the resolution authorizing the redemption of general obligation school bonds, Series 2013, dated June 4, 2013, approving the escrow and amended substituted paying agent, bond register, and transfer agent agreement, and levying a tax for fiscal year 2017-18 for the redemption of general obligation school bonds, Series 2013, dated June 4, 2013.
Second.
Moved by Briggs, second by Rosser. Discussion?
So Chris, this means we're prepaying to save some interest expense, right?
We are on the same schedule that I proposed in last year's budget. So in the current year, we're prepaying $7,330,000, and next year it will be $7,335,000, with the expectation that by fiscal year 2020, which to me is June 30th, 2020, they will be paid off. There will be a fairly significant decrease between fiscal year 19 and 20. And it saves about $6.6 million in interest.
Thanks.
Good job.
And just this resolution alone for the public saves basically 1.5 million.
That's what I put on the
Th-
sheet,
this
that's
year, yeah.
correct.
That's, yeah, 1.5 million as to what has been moved. All right.
Any further discussion?
I just like the part about saving over $6 million in interest by getting this done ahead of time, so.
Actually, Mr. Rasmussen, I think that's the amount of the bonds that are being paid off on that particular issue.
This
And
says
then the rest-
this says debt interest savings of 1.5,
Oh, okay.
is what it says. All right.
Any further discussion? Proceed to vote on roll call.
Briggs, aye.
Rosser, aye.
Rasmussen, aye.
Franzen, aye.
Deardorff, aye.
Talbot, aye.
Esposito, aye.
Passes 7-0. Item 22.
I move the resolution authorizing the redemption of general obligation school bonds, Series 2014, dated January 2nd, 2014, approving the escrow and amended and substituted paying agent, bond register, and transfer agent agreement, and levying a tax for fiscal year 2017-18 for the redemption of general obligation school bonds, Series 2014, dated January 2nd, 2014.
Second.
Moved by Briggs, seconded by Rosser. Discussion? Proceed to vote on roll call.
Briggs, aye.
Rosser, aye.
Rasmussen, aye.
Franzen, aye.
Deardorff, aye.
Talbot, aye.
Esposito, aye.
Passes 7-0. Item 23.
Move the board approve change order number 13 of the contract with HPC LLC for the 24th Street project in the amount of $1,590.
Second.
Is that you, Rodney?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Moved by Esposito, seconded by Briggs. Discussion.
Jerry, this is where they were digging out by the baseball field and help the drainage south?
We're wrapping up some loose ends on that.
Okay. I meant to ask Grant when he was here.
Proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. 24.
Move the board award the design contract for furniture, furnishings, and equipment for the new facilities building to store Kenworthy in the amount not to exceed $3,445.
Second.
Moved by Esposito, seconded by Rasmussen. Discussion. Proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. Item 25.
I move the board approve sale and structures and improvements at the high school softball complex.
Second.
Moved by Rosser, second by Rasmussen. Discussion. Proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. Item 26.
I move the board approve the notice of public hearing, March 27th, 2017, plans, specifications, form of contract, and estimated total cost of the Edwards Elementary demolition and deconstruction.
Second.
Moved by Briggs, second by Rasmussen. Discussion.
I'm a little worried about the timing on this bid. It's been my understanding and experience that demolition is vastly cheaper in winter months. And if I remember the target date right, this bid is to be completed, or not the bid, the project is to be completed by September 1. So I find that a bit concerning.
The project completion on the September date doesn't have as much to do with the demolition as it does to do with establishing the seeding and getting the grass and the grounds planted in that season. We were able to get the project put together, and once we got authorized, and this is our time frame that we're up with. So I do think that our architect has pretty strong network, and he'll bring several contractors in. So I think that we'll have some pretty good interest with this demo project.
Yeah, Bill, I would tend to agree with you. This year, there are two anomalies happening. One, I'm talking to some earthwork people that do demo, and they're doing earthwork now that they've never thought that they would be doing at this time of year. So what they're doing is having more throughput earlier in the year, creating some capacity. That gives us some hope. Secondly, OSHA's got a new silica standard that's going to be coming out enforced on June 23rd that is going to make dusty silica places under higher scrutiny and regulation. And so not having to deal on the back side of that, but getting this through the front side of that may be in our interest.
Does anybody have any guess on, I mean, if Bill's right and this is going to cost us more, what are we talking, what that percentage would be? Is there an
Some
educated
payment
guess?
being taken out of that, so we're hoping it's going to be a little bit less, but Jerry still has been very conservative. I think in your bid around 405,000 is what we have budgeted.
If the bids came in, Bill, I mean, I understand your concern. If the bids came in a lot higher, then we don't have to accept them, do we? Or can we turn them all down?
That's right. We have the
Right.
choice to be able to accept or reject.
I mean, if they come in high, Bill, and we're like, maybe we should wait, then I think we can make that decision at that time.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
No, completely agreed. Then the other thing we need to be mindful of is mowing and upkeep and maintenance and
Exactly.
insurance and those kinds of things too for keeping it for another 8 to 10 months, something like that.
I think it'd be helpful to the community if we move forward with giving it to the city to get it done sooner than later. So I am supportive of, I guess, taking that risk now.
I guess I'd like to call the discussion and request the vote.
Okay. Proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. Item 27.
I move the board award the contract for Edwards Elementary play area improvements to Iowa Earthworks Incorporated in the amount of $77,836.51 for base bid and alternate number 1.
Second.
Moved by Rosser, second by Esposito. Discussion.
I guess for my clarification, we're talking about the Edwards Elementary School active, correct?
Yes, 820 Miller Avenue.
Thank you.
Came in under budget. Item that the public can't see.
Proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. Item 28.
I move the board approve the notice of public hearing, March 27th, 2017, plan specifications, form of contract, and estimated total cost of the Northwood Preschool Center Site Improvements Project.
Second.
Moved by Rosser, second by Rasmussen. Discussion.
I just wanted to call into Jerry, well, you just want to go with it?
No, go ahead.
So on the notice to bidders, I don't believe that we have to change our motion here, but the notice to bidders, it just needs to be corrected. It's not the middle school stadium improvements, it needs to read the Northwood site improvements.
So we'll make that correction prior to being able to publish that.
Any other questions? Proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. Item 29.
I move the board approve final acceptance of the work by the general construction contract completed by HPC LLC on the 24th Street project.
Second.
Moved by Rasmussen, second by Franson. Discussion.
Jerry, you're happy?
Yes.
Content? Willing to support this?
Yes.
All right, good enough.
Can I ask you one question, Jerry? On this project and Fellows, the ability to get rid of the mud, what's the long-term solution? There'll be tall grass, or can you just talk through what that looks like?
Well, in the basins,
Yeah.
that's one of the items that's still a little bit outstanding. The contractors posted a bond for each of those outstanding items, so we have some security on them to be able to finish the work. So
Okay.
in those basins, we're looking at being able to do more of a prairie type of grass, and also want to work with the high school pollinator group to be able to plant those native, or the pollinator groups in those areas, so then the kids at the elementaries can take advantage of that also. So we're kind of killing two birds with one stone, and we're not creating a new garden for the pollinator. Want to work together with them.
Great. Any other questions? Proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. Item 30.
I move the board approve policy BC, board committees as presented.
Second.
Moved by Briggs, second by Rasmussen. Discussion.
This is where we take over from where we left off, correct? From the amendment?
I'm sorry?
This is where we take off because this was tabled at the time of my amendment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I just want to bring the audience, everybody up to date. That, I made the motion so that we can allow for more people to be aware of what is on our committee meetings and be given proper notice so that they can decide whether they want to attend. I think Director Franzen made a good point that when people can come to those committee meetings, hear what's being discussed, have some input, it then makes, better, increase that clearness of what we're doing and what's going on at the committee meetings before it even comes to us. It really opens up the community for better knowledge of what's going on. So that was my intent of doing it. Now, with respect to the 5 days, that is what we do currently for our board meetings. The requirement by law for our board meetings is 24 hours, but we don't do that. We set a policy, which we have done for many years, to notice that 5 days in advance. Now, some have said, and I know we've gotten a legal opinion from our district legal counsel that says, well, it's up to the board to decide what policy we establish for this. And that's what I pretty much want to remind everyone of. Yes, it's going to, in some ways, mean that we might not be able to add something at the last minute on the agenda. I would never suggest doing that, except in an extreme situation where it has to be dealt with prior to the next meeting. But 95% of the, not even that, 99% of the time, we know when our meetings are a month in advance, and we know what's going to be on the agenda. And it's really just a burden of the staff to make sure that they get those things done, whether it's 5 days in advance or 24 hours in advance. So I think we should do this to shed a little more light on our process and involve, meeting is getting long. Losing my voice a little bit. And involve the community a little bit more in our discussions before they even come to the board.
So just to provide clarity, I mean, the motion was to approve as presented, so do you want to make an amendment to that?
I shouldn't have to because my motion was made to add the language, at which time I believe it was, I forget who made it. I'd have to go back to the minutes.
Did you second it?
Yeah, somebody seconded it. And then we discussed it for quite a while. At that point, that's when Bill Talbot, Director Talbot made the motion to table. So the motion, that should be the motion that's on the table.
So for my clarification, Louis, the motion on the table is the requested amendment that was made at the previous meeting with regards to language specifying that the agendas would be posted how far in advance?
So it would be put on the website and be posted 5 days prior to. So for example, if it's a Tuesday or a Monday meeting, then it would be 4 days or 5 days. I mean, comparable to what we're doing right now with our notice for board meetings.
So I don't have the previous motion. I mean, do we have access to that?
The motion is...
Well, that's the question is
as presented, and the presentation in the board packet here is there's no changes. It's exactly as it's been written. So what
Director Rosser is saying we go back to the amendment of which he added, and then it was tabled in that previous meeting. So, Chris, do you want to give us some clarification or guidance?
If I remember right, the motion was amended, It was not voted on. It was tabled to a date certain, which is tonight. So I believe the order would be to vote on the amendment that is in front of the board, and then you can either vote on the original motion or the amended motion, however the vote turns out.
That's correct.
So do we, I don't have access.
Did the amendment have a second?
Yes.
Yeah. So what's on the table is the amendment. Right.
Okay, so I don't have I don't have the original motion. Do we have access to that? I don't remember what it was.
What date was it? It was the date you were gone, so it was you and I worked on the minutes.
Is it in the minutes?
I believe so. The motion was, it was part of the policies that were announced that night, or that were up for action that night. So it was pulled because that particular motion was amended with a second. A discussion happened, but no motion, no vote was taken on the amendment. And then Mr. Talbot tabled it to a date certain. So what you see from the recommendation from the committee is in the agenda item, and then Mr. Rosser's amendment to that is up for vote right now.
So the reality is that the motion that I made approving the policy as presented is actually voided because we are coming back to the point we left when we tabled it. So the motion is actually Lewis's motion.
Right.
Correct. So actually, it is in our board packets. The motion was to add, in addition, board committee agendas, including time and location, will be posted on the district's website 5 days prior to committee meetings. That is in our board packet under executive summary in italics in that paragraph.
I see.
Yeah, and who was the second?
It was Tim Rasmussen, I recall.
That is not in the minutes.
So I guess my opinion on this is our legal opinion says he does not recommend making that change to keep it to the statutory requirement 24 hours. As we discussed the last time, we need to conduct business on sometimes tight time schedules. And so with the notion of having to give 5 days notice when we've reached out anyway is, I don't think, I'm not supportive of.
My question is with regards to that. If we were to go with the language of 5 days, which we are within our right to do, we are now essentially creating a rule that exceeds the rule of law that's established. If we do not adhere to that rule, are we setting ourselves up for liability as if we had violated the law?
No. The law is very clear. If you do it, sure. If you just throw something on the agenda and change it willy-nilly, yeah. But the law is very clear. If there's an emergency situation, and same goes for our board meetings now, if there's an emergency situation that must be dealt with before the board meets again, you can add it to the agenda. But it has to be a real emergency. You can't just say, oh, well, we think it's an emergency, and then throw it off. Okay? So the law is very clear on that, and the courts have been very narrow about the way they've approached that. I don't disagree with our legal advice on that. But that's the point of notice. We shouldn't be adding things to an agenda with less than 24 hours for our community to consider things at a committee.
I'm confused.
If we don't know about something 5 or 4 days ahead of time, folks, it can wait. And if that means that the staff's going to have to do it a week earlier than what they're doing now, then that's what they're going to have to do. But, I think, just limiting ourselves to not having the opportunity of people to have the input at the committee level, which I think is very important. It's something I think we're lacking. It's been said here tonight that it's helpful when people come to those committee meetings can ask a question, can hear the discussion in those committee meetings of the information back and forth between the experts that are usually at those committee meetings that aren't always at our board meetings. That's where the work of our board gets done. So not having, parents, community members not have, easy access to those committee meetings, in my mind, makes our work harder. if
One
those
of
are
the
more
other
open,
opinions.
they're better.
One of the
I'm
great
confused.
things about the committee structure is that you can be nimble. That's one of the great things about it. My experience with timing comes mostly from facilities. And I can assure you that we had emergency meetings on a regular basis. That the courts never would have considered emergencies, but saved us thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars in construction. For the facilities meeting, a 5-day notice is not practical for many of our problems. The second issue that comes up with the committee meetings is that if we have to cancel a meeting because one director has commitments, remember we all have day jobs, we're able to move that meeting to when both directors can attend. If we give 5 days notice, that's really not practical. So I don't care who comes to the committee meetings. I think I've said before, I don't care if you put a camera on the committee meeting and broadcast it to everybody in the entire world. I just don't want to be in a position where we're constantly having to violate our own policy.
I think that I would encourage us to think about, what other government agencies, when I think of our school board committees, I think of them as the commissions within the city of Ames. To my knowledge, at least the commission I served on, we did not receive, the agenda did not get posted until 48 hours in advance. So, and I can think of times within network that agendas were adjusted that close to the time of that meeting. So I agree with some of the concerns that have brought forward. This is in no way meaning that I don't value the public's participation, and I have gone above and beyond to try to make sure the public has been aware of our meeting time. That is not my intent. My intent is exactly what our district attorney said, is that you are making it potentially difficult for you to make adjustments close to the meeting time.
I agree with Director Franzen, and for the Teaching and Learning Committee items, I'm able to witness the communication she has with all these groups of parents, encouraging people to get there, putting out what is our tentative agenda way in advance, and doing exactly what Director Rosser is asking for. It's not the set agenda. The formal agenda comes out on schedule, meets the state law, and I believe that is our best move for, to meet the requirement. And yes, we want to engage the community, and she's doing a much better job of it than I am as far as trying to get people to come to teaching and learning. But I think that's, I wouldn't be supportive of a 5-day.
My final 2 cents worth on this one is, I don't know how you can be in agreement with the attorney and then request 5 days when the attorney says, stick with what the law states. 2, we are making leaps and bounds going forward by establishing that these committees will be put out on the internet and we will have agendas and things published. It's not something we've ever done before. We're putting it in writing, we're putting it in policy. What we're really looking at here, to me, is a practice issue, and that comes back more to the administrative side of it. We have in policy that we're going to meet the expectation of 24 hours, as the law states. Great. The practice part of it from the admin rules side can establish a greater time period in which that happens, if we want to lock in a number. The reality of it is that when those packets are sent to us, the individual responsible for gathering that information, putting it together, and disseminating the agenda should also be disseminating that information to our communications director, who can then talk with the different parts that need to have that information and make sure that that is put on the website and it's public at that moment in time. That way, everyone's getting the information together. Kathy should be part of that email chain. Whether she's an active member of that committee or not, she is an active piece of this being communicated.
So let's, what I'd like to do is vote on the amendment. So again, we're going to vote on what was suggested plus the addition of 5 days prior to the committee meetings. So all those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay.
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 Fails 1-6. And to the original motion. Do you want to do a new motion just to clarify? Just okay. All right, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. All right, items from the board.
We've been here long enough, okay?
All right. Items from the staff.
We have been here long enough. I don't think we'll be needing a budget guarantee this year or termination notices, but it'll be Meeker's turn at our next meeting at the end of March, where they're talking about their CARES program. I think the board will enjoy that. We're also trying to possibly schedule a policy meeting for next week. And don't forget, spring break runs the dates of March 13 through 17, which I think we're all looking forward to.
All right, I will take a motion to go into closed session.
Move we go into, do I need to read this?
Yeah.
Okay. I move the board go into closed session under code section 21.5A to review or discuss records which are required or authorized by state or federal law to be kept confidential or to be kept confidential as a condition for that governmental body's possession or continued receipt of federal funds, and under 21.5C to discuss strategy with counsel in matters that are presently in litigation or where litigation is imminent, where its disclosure would be likely to prejudice or disadvantage the position of the governmental body in that litigation. A roll call.
There's a second. Second.
I think Rasmussen did.
Moved by Franson, second by Rasmussen. Discussion? Proceed to vote on roll call.
Briggs, aye.
Rosser, aye.
Rasmussen, aye.
France and I.
Deardorff, aye.
Talbot, aye.
Esposito, aye.
It passes 7-0. We're in closed session.
I'll make that.
Sure.
We are out of closed session. I'll take the motion on item 35.
I move the board go into closed session as provided in 21.5 1J of the open meetings law to discuss the purchase or sale of particular real estate only where premature disclosure could be reasonably expected to increase the price of the governmental body would have to pay for that property or reduce the price the governmental body would receive for that property.
Second.
Moved by Franson, second by Rasmussen. Discussion? Proceed to vote on roll call.
Briggs, aye.
Rosser, aye.
Rasmussen, aye.
Franz and I.
Deardorff, aye.
Talbot, aye.
Esposito, aye.
Passes 7-0. We're in closed session.
Overtime, Patrick.
We are out of closed session. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I move
to
we
adjourn.
Moved by Franson, second by Briggs. Discussion? Proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. We're adjourned.